Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku had absolute control over a solar flare quirk? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. In primary school, Izuku Midoriya was defined by his stillness. He was the quiet kid, often found observing, his mind racing far faster than his small body moved. He preferred the quietude of a window seat to the noise of the playground, which suited the other children just fine. But one child could not tolerate the existence of a mystery, Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo was driven by a need for absolute superiority. When he cornered Izuku behind the gymnasium one afternoon, his voice was already laced with the promise of future power. "Look at you, Deku," Bakugo sneered, attempting a light shove that failed to move Izuku an inch. "Still standing there like you're better than everyone. You're worthless." Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't offer a defense. He simply met Bakugo's enraged gaze, his eyes holding a depth of quiet surety that momentarily stole the wind from the bully. Then, without any visible wind-up, Izuku's fist moved. It was a single, short, terrifyingly precise punch aimed at Bakugo's gut. The sound was not the soft impact of children's play, but a dull, deep thud. Bakugo gasped, the aggression dissolving instantly into genuine, visceral pain. The breath was violently expelled from his lungs as he stumbled back several paces, clutching his stomach in disbelief. From that day forward, the entire dynamic shifted. Bakugo understood he could not physically dominate Izuku. His bullying ceased being physical assault and transformed into searing, verbal resentment. Bakugo settled for intense glares from a distance, forever frustrated by the fact that the worthless Deku was physically superior. A few weeks later, Bakugo's quirk, Explosion, finally emerged. He became intoxicated with the instant acclaim, spending the next few days demonstrating his quirk, the small, triumphant detonations cementing his status as the star of the class. The spotlight lasted exactly 4 days. During an afternoon art class, Izuku was quietly coloring. He wasn't making a show of it, but the object in his hand, a wax crayon, was emitting a thin, sickly plume of smoke. Izuku watched it with clinical detachment. The crayon suddenly liquefied, turning into a bubbling, molten pool of wax that instantly burned through the paper and left a smoking, scorched crater in the wooden desk beneath. Surprisingly enough, Izuku's hand was perfectly fine. The room went silent. Every eye, including Bakugo's, fixed on the dangerous, silent display of destructive heat. Bakugo's face twisted in pure, jealous agony. Izuku, without trying, had stolen his moment. His power was not flashy, it was simply lethal. That evening, Izuku was pulled from school. The quirk specialist confirmed their fears. Solar flare was a quirk of overwhelming, dangerous potency. Izuku and his mother soon moved away, vanishing without a trace. To the students of Aldra, the terrifyingly strong boy who could melt matter with a touch became a ghost. Izuku returned as a transfer student during the first year of middle school. He was still quiet, but the boy who walked into the classroom now carried an air of controlled power that commanded respect, even when silent. Bakugo, instantly recognizing the familiar threat, chose to avoid confrontation, allowing his pride to simmer in a constant state of resentment. The school's existing hierarchy, however, had missed the primary school lessons. 2 loud, aggressive upperclassmen cornered Izuku in the crowded hall, demanding respect and a shakedown from the new kid. Izuku sighed, the sound echoing a profound sense of boredom. He had conserved his energy and control for years. He would not waste it on schoolyard thugs. The spectacle was swift and public. The 2 bullies found themselves airborne. Izuku moved with a blur of pure speed. It wasn't a messy brawl, but a demonstration of kinetic perfection. The blows were precise, targeting nerve clusters and pressure points. The confrontation was over in seconds. The bullies left crumpled and dazed against the lockers. His reputation was set, super strong and mysterious transfer student. The fear that followed allowed Izuku to develop his social skills naturally. He was still quiet, but no one saw him as weak. his contributions to conversation were respected. When his new friends inevitably probed him about his long absence and transfer, Izuku offered a simple, slightly mysterious truth. "We moved out to the countryside," Izuku explained. "My mom had some family there and I met my grandpa. He taught me a really specific way to fight, how to properly wield a sword." His friends exchanged confused glances. "A sword? Seriously, why a sword?" Izuku shrugged, a genuine admission of uncertainty. "Honestly, I don't know," he confessed, looking down at his hand, the same hand that had melted a crayon years ago. "It just felt right. Like it was the only thing I was ever meant to be holding." The 3 years of middle school cemented Izuku's reputation as the strongest student in the school physically and in terms of raw quirk potential. This reality was a bitter, perpetual wound for Katsuki Bakugo, who could only simmer in impotent rage, knowing that for the first time, the DM in Deku was genuinely superior, for now. One afternoon in their final year, the homeroom teacher entered, holding a stack of career forms. He threw them dramatically into the air, shouting, "I know you all want to be heroes." The classroom erupted in excitement and shouts of self-promotion. One of Izuku's friends sighed contentedly. "Seriously, you and Bakugo are shoo-ins for you, Izuku," he said, the statement carrying absolute certainty. "No doubt you're getting in." Others quickly murmured their agreement, lumping the two powerful students together. Bakugo scoffed, the sound venomous and defensive. "Of course, I will, you damn in extras. I'm going to be number one. Don't group me with that idiot, though." His dismissal was loud, but it masked the deep-seated resentment that Izuku's effortless superiority had fostered over the past 3 years. The day of the practical exam arrived. Izuku stood outside the gate for Sector B, a picture of lethal calm. After President Mick's loud, final warnings about the zero-pointer obstacle, the crowd tensed. Izuku held a wooden katana, a polished bakken resting lightly in his grip. He had decided on a simple strategy: rely solely on his superhuman physical strength and sun mastery training. His quirk, Solar Flare, was too destructive and carried the constant risk of collateral damage. It was unnecessary. "Go!" Izuku was gone before the shout fully registered. It moved with a terrifying, continuous blur of speed, leaving the other hopefuls in his dust. He didn't bother with complex moves. His wooden katana became a sledgehammer. He utilized precise, single-strike impacts against the robot's vital joints, dismantling them with effortless force. Around a corner, a cluster of robots materialized, but Izuku's trained mind instantly calculated the exact chain of movements needed. The wooden blade flashed high sweep, 2 low jabs, a pivot, and a downward strike, leaving the 5 machines in simultaneous scrap heaps. He accumulated 100 points in minutes, stopping with his breath perfectly even. He was in. He turned to rest, but then the ground shook violently. The immense, mechanical titan of the zero-pointer stomped into the arena. Izuku watched it, calculating the safest exit path. It was an obstacle for others, helping cement his status as first, and his job was done. Then a sound pierced the mechanical screeching, a desperate, choked scream. He turned back. Beneath the massive, grinding foot of the robot, only a few yards away, a student he didn't recognize was trapped. It was Momo Yaoyorozu, her long black hair tied in a spiky ponytail, her face etched with profound frustration. She was pinned beneath a heavy chunk of debris, her analytical mind useless against the overwhelming physical reality. Izuku's hero instinct, the deep-seated drive that superseded tactical calculation, ignited. The zero-pointer's immense armor was designed to withstand quirk attacks, but Izuku had an output that didn't rely on fire. He dropped his wooden katana, sprinting toward the robot. He channeled all his training and immense physical power into his right fist, timing his leap perfectly. He didn't need to melt the armor, he needed to shatter the structure. Izuku delivered one single, devastating punch against the thick metallic casing of the zero-pointer's central body. The sound was not an explosion, but a searing, catastrophic crunch. The impact instantly created a clean hole right through the torso of the zero-pointer. The machine seized up, sparks flying, and slowly began to topple backward. Izuku landed lightly next to Momo. He easily moved the heavy rubble and twisted rebar off of her legs, his physical strength making the immense weight trivial. He then extended a hand to help her up, his posture shifting almost instinctively. He retrieved the wooden katana, resting it over his shoulder like a bored delinquent. Momo took his hand, her eyes wide with shock and grudging admiration. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion and the fading effects of adrenaline. Before Izuku could respond, Present Mix's voice boomed over the speakers. "Time is UEP." In the faculty observation room, the UA staff watched the zero-pointer collapse, followed by Izuku's completely unaffected demeanor, and their discussion immediately pivoted from standard scoring to the sheer, terrifying potential of this student. The entire faculty flinched as the sound of the impact, a crushing, deafening KK, reverberated through the reinforced walls. The zero-pointer, a machine designed to withstand tank fire, was instantly neutralized. Principal Nizu sipped his tea, a wide, calculating smile stretching his face. A strength quirk of terrifying magnitude, used with surgical restraint until absolutely necessary. He possesses peerless kinetic force that requires zero recovery time. His control seems to be the only limit. Aizawa was genuinely startled, his eyes wide. He pulled up a holographic file on the monitor nearest him. That kind of output defies training. He's operating at maximum output without a drawback. All Might sat forward, staring at the screen with an expression bordering on awe. He didn't even need his full strength. He had so much in reserve that the zero-pointer was just a heavy bag. He is a force of nature. Aizawa frowned, scrolling through the data. Hold on. This is unusual. His registered quirk isn't super strength or kinetic boost. He tapped the file, displaying the entry, quirk, solar flare. Type, emitter, high thermal plasma generation. Recovery Girl's jaw dropped. What? No, that can't be right. Thermal quirks don't grant that kind of base physical durability. Look at him. He should have a broken arm. Why didn't he use the heat? Nizu chuckled, setting his teacup down with a quiet clink. Now it gets interesting. We have two possibilities. 1. His file is simply wrong. Or 2. The high thermal quirk has somehow granted him a biologically perfect physique capable of surviving his own potential heat, which conveniently makes him resistant to physical recoil as well. Aizawa rubbed the bridge of his nose. If his physical strength is merely a beneficial side effect of a heat quirk, then he has effectively two top-tier abilities: peerless strength and devastating thermal power, and he chose to use only the strength for the exam. All Might nodded grimly. His DSPN must be absolute, then. He risked failing the exam by holding back his primary quirk just to avoid collateral damage. His training here won't be about building strength, it will be about honing his DSPN to control the ultimate weapon he possesses. Well, that boy won't be needing me. Recovery Girl huffed. He needs a tutor in damage mitigation, not a healer. The faculty concluded their initial assessment. Izuku Midoriya was a super prodigy who represented a destructive potential they had never before witnessed in a student. His entrance had already shaken the very foundations of UA's expectations. Izuku waited patiently for his acceptance letter. There was never any doubt in his mind, only a quiet certainty of logistics. When the thick envelope arrived, his prediction was true. The holographic projection of All Might, smiling with his signature impossible brilliance, congratulated Izuku on his acceptance and placing first in the practical exam. The hero specifically emphasized the extraordinary number of rescue points he had earned for his single action, overshadowing everyone else. Not long after, Izuku was off to UA. He arrived at Class 1A promptly, punctuality being an absolute necessity in his self-imposed code. The classroom was immediately loud. He found the source near the door, Katsuki Bakugo, already locked in a shouting match with a tall, rigid boy in glasses, Tenya Ida. Ida was gesturing wildly at Bakugo's feet, lecturing him on the sanctity of UA's classroom furniture. Bakugo ignored him completely, until he caught sight of the newcomer. Bakugo slammed his hands down on the desk nearest the door. "Oi, get over here." Izuku sighed faintly, pushing past the explosion boy. Let me sit down, Bakugo. Then you can scream all you like. The dismissal hit Bakugo like a physical blow, silencing his rage for a split second before it intensified. He grabbed Izuku by the collar. You pathetic coward. I heard you only used that overwhelming strength. You held back your quirk. Scared of your own power, Deku? Izuku's eyes, usually quiet, narrowed slightly. He didn't dignify the accusation of cowardice with the response. Instead, he simply reached up, his fingers clamping around Bakugo's wrist. He didn't use heat, only a fraction of his kinetic power, but the precise pressure was immediately agonizing. Bakugo's eyes widened, the pain forcing a guttural sound out of him. He instantly let go. Don't be foolish, Izuku said, his voice flat. He walked away from the simmering Bakugo and took his seat by the window. The room was instantly tense. Izuku stared out the window, already bored with the internal drama. Bakugo clicked his tongue, a sound like grinding teeth, and slumped back into his own chair. It was during this heavy silence that Momo Yaoyorozu approached Izuku's desk. She cleared her throat politely. Midoriya-san, she began, her tone formal. I didn't get a chance to thank you properly after the practical. You saved my life. I owe you a favor. Izuku turned to face her, his expression softening slightly but remaining guarded. I don't need favors. That was the rescue portion of the exam. You don't owe me anything. Momo frowned, ready to deny his quick dismissal, but she was interrupted by a low, dry voice. If you're here to make friends, you can leave now. They all turned to see Shota Aizawa, wrapped in his sleeping bag, slumping on the floor near the door. He unzipped the bag and stood, revealing his tired eyes. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is precious. Put on these uniforms and head outside. We have a test. Once outside, the students performed a series of quirk-fueled physical tests. In every single event, the 50-meter dash, the grip strength test, the standing long jump, Izuku consistently placed first, relying only on his peerless physical strength. The speed was a blur, the strength test broke the machine, and his vertical leap was literally out of sight for a moment. Bakugo glowered, his frustration mounting with every passing score. The other students, however, murmured in awe, admiring his dominance. Aizawa looked at the results, his expression bored. This is getting predictable, he sighed, shoving the score sheet into a pocket of his capture weapon. The last test needs to be less standard. It's time to test awareness and collective failure. He separated the students. Groups was used loosely here, as one group was just Izuku, while the other group was the entire remainder of Class 1A. The rules are simple. Catch him, Aizawa announced, gesturing to Izuku. The boundary is the field. Time limit, 5 minutes. Whoever catches Izuku, which means to touch him, like a game of tag, gets a free 100 on the first academic exam. The incentive immediately turned the entire class hostile. Momo hesitated only for a moment, her analytical mind snapping into action as she calculated Izuku's speed vectors. The clock started. Everyone charged. Izuku, however, moved with an almost insulting grace. He didn't run away. He simply used his kinetic speed and perfect body control to weave through every attack. Ida's speed was a linear concept compared to Izuku's instant, multidirectional shifts. Ashido's acid spray sailed harmlessly past empty air. Even Bakugo's targeted explosions only managed to hit the ground where Izuku had been a millisecond before. Aizawa took notes, focusing intensely on Izuku's subtle movements and the team dynamics of the attackers. With only 10 seconds left on the clock, Izuku, still completely untouched, came to a slow, calculated stop. There was no penalty for being tagged, and he realized allowing a win might provide a more interesting dataset for Aizawa. Kirishima, using his hardening quirk, was the student closest to him. He was running on pure desperation. As Kirishima launched forward for a final, frantic lunge, Izuku made a negligible pivot, slightly slowing his rotation. Kirishima's hardened hand tagged the center of Izuku's back. I got him! Kirishima roared, beaming, convinced Izuku had made a manly choice to let him win. Aizawa, however, was not fooled. He looked directly at Izuku. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice flat. My test was designed to reward cunning and persistence, and you showed me a perfect demonstration of both. Until the last 2 seconds, when you clearly let yourself be tagged. DSPLN. 0. He paused. Your penalty is simple. You will stay after school every day this week and clean this classroom until it is spotless. Every single speck. For the first time since returning, Izuku's quiet demeanor broke. A rare flicker of genuine annoyance crossed his face, not at the work, but at being called out for his decision. Several students, including Kirishima, were shocked by the display of emotion. Bakugo, seeing Izuku's annoyance, let out a barking, mocking laugh. Aizawa's eyes flashed red. And Bakugo, he drawled, you're on cleaning duty all next week. The classroom was unnaturally silent when Aizawa finally packed his sleeping bag and shuffled out, leaving only the sound of Bakugo's muffled curses from the hallway. Izuku stared at the pile of debris, the scattered desks, and the faint scorch marks from the earlier explosion test. He sighed. The annoyance resurfaced, not because of the task's tedium, but because Aizawa's assessment DSPN was a direct challenge to his strategic perfection. He had allowed the one imperfection, the final tag. He didn't bother with a broom immediately. Instead, he started moving the heaviest desks, stacking them neatly at the back of the room. He used precision, not brute force, lifting them straight up with zero noise or friction, treating them like featherweight props. You really don't need to do that by hand, you know, a voice said softly from the doorway. It was Momo Yaoyorozu. She was still wearing her uniform, holding her leather-bound satchel. Izuku didn't stop, continuing to stack the furniture. The requirement is spotless. The penalty is the time investment required to make it so. Momo walked further in, stopping a respectful distance away. I stayed to insist, actually. She met his gaze with unusual firmness. You saved my life. I have an ethical obligation. I can use my quirk to create automated scrubbers or specialized vacuum drones right now. It would be faster and far more efficient. Efficiency is irrelevant here, Izuku countered, placing the last desk perfectly atop the stack. He grabbed a pile of shredded paper. Aizawa's lesson isn't about cleanliness. It's about a strategic failure. If I use your quirk to solve my problem, I'm simply accepting another student's help to cover my mistake in judgment. But it's absurd. Your time should be spent on training, not janitorial work, Momo argued, stepping over a stray piece of rubble. And you still won't accept my thanks. Izuku turned to face her, his hands full of rubbish. Yaoyorozu, you don't owe me thanks. My action against the zero-pointer was the only logical, high-probability outcome that resulted in your survival. I was punished for choosing a sloppy conclusion, letting the tag happen, not for the rescue itself. He dropped the rubbish into a bin. I won't turn a statistically sound rescue into a transactional debt. That is highly inefficient. Momo looked at the room, then at his calm, detached face. I see you being incredibly methodical, she conceded, the admiration in her eyes now mixed with confusion. But I still feel indebted. Izuku gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of his head. If you must, then study harder, become a more competent hero, and avoid being trapped under falling debris. That is the only payment a hero ever needs. He started calmly sweeping a corner of the room with a standard broom, the movement precise and meditative. Momo watched him for a long moment, a flicker of thoughtful concern replacing the debt in her expression. She gave a small, dignified nod. Very well, Midoriya-san. I will become a hero worthy of that standard. Thank you again. She turned and left the classroom, leaving Izuku to his quiet, focused penance. The following Monday, Izuku's week of cleaning duty ended, transferring the chore to Katsuki Bakugo. The week had been relatively boring, characterized by Izuku's usual quiet focus, occasionally punctuated by Momo Yaoyorozu striking up a formal conversation with him in the hallway. No one else seemed to dare approach the silent powerhouse. But something interesting finally came up. Aizawa had instructed Izuku to meet with him in the faculty office once classes were over. Returning from the restroom to grab his bag, Izuku heard a violent, frustrated kairake emanating from the classroom. He paused by the door. Inside, Bakugo was struggling with the mop, a scorched, black mess now bubbling slightly near his feet. Bakugo had clearly attempted to use small, controlled explosions to vaporize the grime, only succeeding in creating a permanent soot mark and a toxic cloud. Bakugo glanced up, seeing the perfectly composed Izuku silhouetted in the doorway. He flinched, a flicker of raw, petty embarrassment crossing his face before it was replaced by pure rage. "Get lost, Deku. I don't need your demon pity," Bakugo roared, violently kicking the ruined mop head into the trash. Izuku, unwilling to waste energy on the confrontation, simply retrieved his bag and left the room. He headed directly to the staff room, finding Shota Aizawa waiting for him. Aizawa gestured to a chair across a small table, handing him a water bottle. "You've proven your commitment to detail, Midoriya. The classroom is spotless, which is more than I can say for Bakugo's corner," Aizawa said dryly. "But that's not why you're here." Aizawa leaned forward, the exhaustion in his eyes seeming deeper than usual, but the tone was focused. "My DSPLN. 0. Critique was correct, but incomplete. It wasn't about the tag in the end. It was about your fundamental flaw. You treat human life as a variable you can control and optimize." He looked directly at Izuku. "You are an engine of perfect kinetic efficiency. You don't get tired, you don't panic, and you don't break. You see a clear path to victory and you execute it. That's why you held back your quirk, because it was inefficient to risk collateral damage. But heroes don't live in a calculator, Midoriya. They live in the mess," Aizawa continued, his voice softening with an intense, underlying commitment. "The one thing your perfect method can't account for is when the casualty list goes up. When you fail to save someone because you prioritize the mission's success over their fleeting moment of panic." Aizawa's eyes glowed red for a split second, then returned to normal. "Your new training is simple. Learn to account for the logic of loss in your flawless calculations. Heroes operate in the real world, where people panic and make mistakes. You must sacrifice your efficiency for the chaotic, emotional necessity of rescue. If you can't accept that price, you are just a dangerous machine." Aizawa's words, heavy with unspoken sincerity, were the only truly new and unexpected data Izuku had received in years. He nodded, accepting the challenge. He left UA that evening, the weight of the new lessons settling over him. Upon arriving home, he went straight to his room, pulling out the well-worn, polished wooden katana the Bakken from its stand. This was a nightly ritual. He didn't practice to get better, as he already knew the movements by heart. He practiced for DSPLN, to maintain the kinetic perfection his body had achieved. Izuku was 7 years old, fresh from the incident with the melted crayon. He stood on a dusty wooden porch in the quiet countryside, his mother having just left him. The man who stepped out of the house was tall and wiry, with a surprising head of reddish-black hair that stood in stark contrast to Izuku's green curls. He looked Izuku up and down with an appraising, almost hungry look. "So, this is my special grandson that I've heard so much about?" the old man said, a rough, calloused hand reaching out to pinch Izuku's cheek lightly. He had the sharp, hawk-like eyes of a lifelong martial artist. "That lazy son of mine was never worthy to continue my legacy, but it seems he blessed me with the perfect disciple." Izuku, young and quiet, didn't understand the comment, but time passed quickly. He soon came to see his grandfather as a relatively kind man when they weren't training. But training was a terrifying, ruthless necessity. When the wooden swords came out, the grandfather transformed. He was no longer kind. He was a machine of precision, a master of a lost kinetic art he called Sun Mastery. He was demanding, scary, and utterly uncompromising. He taught Izuku that immense power was useless without absolute control, and that control was only achieved through pain and repetition. Years passed in a blur of sweat, wood-on-wood clashes, and strained muscle. Izuku's body, already genetically perfect due to the secondary effects of his solar flare quirk, absorbed the training with terrifying speed. He mastered the flows, the pivots, and the deadly, precise kinetic strikes. Finally, 3 years later, it was time for the final test, a duel with his grandfather. They met in the sunlit yard. For 10 minutes, The air crackled with controlled force. It was not a violent brawl, but a mesmerizing display of discipline and mastery. Every block, every move, every movement was perfectly calculated, their two bodies flowing like liquid gold and iron. Then, with a final, blindingly fast parry that disarmed the old man, Izuku was the winner. His grandfather immediately slumped to the ground, dramatically closing his eyes with a sigh. So the student becomes the master? It seems I am not long for this world after all. A moment of silence passed. Izuku walked up to the corpse of the old man. Izuku, in a rare flash of annoyance, said, "Open your eyes, old man." Silence. The grandfather gave no sign of life. Izuku then proceeded to swiftly kick the old man in the side. "Oh, you brat!" the old man shouted, instantly leaping up and clutching his ribs, all pretense of a noble death gone. That's not how a respectable final duel is supposed to end. Before Izuku left the countryside for good, his grandfather pulled him aside one last time. He pressed a small, heavy brick into Izuku's hand. It was an extremely dense, dark gray cube of tungsten. "This is a family heirloom," his grandfather said, the only emotion in his voice being genuine pride. "Hold it. Use it. It's dense, quiet, and doesn't melt. Like you." Izuku effortlessly picked up the brick, the immense weight feeling trivial in his hand. He understood. It was a tangible measure of the kinetic power he was meant to wield, the quiet, perfect discipline. In the present, Izuku completed his final sword swing, the bakken resting quietly on his shoulder. He picked up the heavy tungsten brick from his desk and turned it over in his hand, Aizawa's words echoing the philosophy of his grandfather. Discipline is not about having a perfect method, but having the resolve to abandon it when saving a life demands it. The challenge was accepted. The next morning, the class was gathered, the tension palpable after the cleaning penalties. All Might burst through the classroom door, his massive, impossible figure filling the frame. "I am here to teach hero basic training." He announced the day's exercise, the battle trial. But first, All Might bellowed, pointing to the walls where briefcases were emerging, "I need you to retrieve your battle gear. These costumes were designed and approved based on the requests you submitted during the application process. Suit up and meet me at ground beta." Izuku took out his hero gear. His gear took heavy inspiration from the Ronin style. It was mostly black with accents of red, emphasizing mobility and quiet strength. He quickly put it on. Then he grabbed the magnum opus of his gear. It was the scabbard, mostly made of durable metals, but had a bit of tungsten mixed in to increase its resistance to his latent heat. He then unsheathed the katana, or rather, the hilt itself. The blade of the katana was clearly missing, as the scabbard had no blade inside. The hilt was dark gray, made entirely of tungsten. Needless to say, the support course heroes were very excited to work with such fine material. He then reached inside the briefcase, grabbing one of the alloy blades and attaching it onto the tungsten hilt with a precise click. He then put the other spare blades and wrapped them neatly in a discreet HR's slot at his back. Then he got to the designated section of ground beta that All Might spoke about, where he saw the other students gathered in their costumes. That's when Momo Yaoyorozu walked up to him. Her own costume was striking, showcasing her ability to create anything from her exposed skin. "Midoriya-sen," she said, her voice formal but soft. "Your costume. The kinetic Ronin, isn't it? It truly suits your style. The efficiency of the design is impressive." Izuku, who was running a diagnostic on the newly attached blade, simply stared at her, taking in the full visual data of her outfit. He was analyzing her mobility versus her thermal exposure, his quiet gaze intense. Momo quickly got embarrassed, shuffling her feet and rushing to explain why her costume was revealing, tripping herself over her words. I apologize, I know it's a bit much, but my Quirk creation needs to emerge from my skin. The more area exposed, the more I can create at once. I truly didn't mean for it to be distracting." She muttered to herself, "Perhaps I need to think of a new design." Izuku seemed to look away, turning his gaze towards the cityscape of the training ground. Momo assumed it was his way of telling her to leave. She felt extremely dispirited and was about to turn around when Izuku called out to her before she left, his voice flat but clear. "It looks good on you." Momo paused, turning back in surprise. It was then that she noticed his ears were slightly red, the only sign that his perfect emotional containment had failed. A mischievous grin spread across her face. She rushed over right next to him, poking his side playfully. "Oh, what exactly did you mean by that, Midoriya-san? That it's efficient, or that it's good to look at?" she teased, enjoying the small, very human victory. Before the teasing could grow any more, All Might's thunderous voice called everyone's attention. "Welcome, my students. You look like bona fide heroes." All Might explained the rules of the battle trial, heroes versus villains. A bomb scenario, and then Aizawa interjected, his voice dry and tired. "The real purpose of these exercises is to push you past your comfortable boundaries," Aizawa said, noticeably making a quick, pointed glance at Izuku. "You'll learn what to do when your perfect plan falls apart. We're testing heroism, not just combat efficiency." All Might ignored the dramatic undertone and clapped his hands together with a boom. "Now for the matchups." He read the list of names, the tension building with each pairing. And finally, Team A are the heroes, Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. All Might paused. For dramatic effect. Facing them as the villains, Team D, Tenya Ida and Mizo Shoji. Izuku looked across the crowd at his teammates and opponents. Uraraka gave a nervous but determined salute. Ida was already in character, striking a rigid, villainous pose, while Shoji remained quietly observant. The final test had begun. The 5-minute setup PRD began. Inside the concrete stronghold, Tenya Ida was vibrating with nervous energy, channeling it into his role. He paced around the papier-mâché nuclear weapon on the 5th floor. "Shoji!" Ida barked, adjusting his helmet. "We must embody true villainy. I have removed all loose objects from this floor to negate Uraraka's zero gravity. Your role is sensory defense. Where are they?" Mizo Shoji stood like a statue near the central pillar, his dupli arms transformed into eyes and ears. "They are at the southwest entrance. They aren't moving yet. They're talking." Down on the street level, Ochako Uraraka was fidgeting with the oversized wrist guards of her pink and black hero suit. She glanced at her partner. Izuku stood perfectly still, his eyes scanning the building's blueprints with that terrifying, machine-like focus. Deku-kun? She started, using the nickname he had surprisingly allowed her to keep. "Do we have a plan? Ida-kun is really fast, and Shoji-kun can hear everything." Izuku lowered the map. "Efficiency dictates a direct assault," he said, his voice void of tension. "Ida relies on linear acceleration. In a confined space, his reciproburst is a liability if the terrain changes. Shoji provides omnidirectional awareness, meaning stealth is statistically impossible." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I will engage both combatants. I will dismantle Ida's mobility and neutralize Shoji's reach. You will proceed to the weapon. Your objective is solely the retrieval." Uraraka frowned, her hands clenching. "But isn't that dangerous? Taking on 2 people? We should work together." Izuku paused. Aizawa's words from the faculty room echoed in his mind. "You treat human life as a variable you can control. Heroes live in the mess." He looked at Uraraka. She wasn't a variable. She was terrified, but she was standing her ground. If he went alone, he was efficient. But if he failed to contain Ida, Uraraka would be left defenseless against a speedster she couldn't track. "Correction," Izuku said, adjusting the tungsten hilt at his hip. "I will draw their fire. I need you to stay in my blind spot. When I create an opening in the ceiling, you use your quirk on yourself to float through it. Can you execute that?" Uraraka's eyes lit up. He was trusting her with the win condition. "Yes, I can do it." "Then let's go. Start." All Might's voice boomed over the speakers. They moved. Izuku didn't run, he glided. His steps were silent, absorbing the impact rather than projecting it. They reached the 3rd floor without resistance. Suddenly, a tentacle shot through the wall Shoji, punching through the concrete to ambush them. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't even draw his blade. He simply stepped inside the arc of the tentacle, grabbed the appendage, and used his hip to leverage Shoji's immense strength against him. With a sharp exhale, Izuku threw the massive multi-armed student through the drywall and into the open corridor. "Go!" Izuku commanded calmly. Uraraka scrambled past, heading for the stairs. Shoji recovered quickly, his duplicate mouths forming on his limbs. "He's strong. Ida, he's coming up. I will not allow it." The sound of an engine revving filled the stairwell. Tenya Ida, glowing with the blue exhaust of his recipro burst, rocketed down the stairs. He was moving faster than the eye could track. A bullet of blue and silver aimed directly at Uraraka. "Ida-kun!" Uraraka squeaked, freezing up. It was the logic of loss. Izuku saw the trajectory. If he maintained his position to fight Shoji, Ida would hit Uraraka. The mission efficiency said secure the weapon, but the hero instinct screamed protect the partner. Izuku abandoned his stance. He blurred. It wasn't the heat of a star, but the gravity of one. Izuku intercepted Ida's charge not with a block, but with a collision. He stepped into the speedster's path, dropping his center of gravity. Crash. The hallway shook. Dust billowed out. When it cleared, Class 1A watched the monitors in stunned silence. Izuku stood rooted to the spot. He had caught Ida's armored leg with one hand, the tungsten-reinforced glove gripping the metal greave. The floor beneath Izuku's feet was cracked in a spiderweb pattern from the absorbed force. Ida's engine sputtered, his momentum instantly killed by an immovable object. "How?" "You overcommitted," Izuku said softly. "Linear speed is useless against a stationary fortress." With a fluid motion, Izuku twisted his torso and threw Ida backward, sending the class president tumbling into Shoji. The two villains crashed into a tangle of limbs. Izuku looked up at the ceiling above them. He drew his blade, the dull alloy singing as it left the tungsten sheath. He didn't slash at his opponents. He slashed up. A singular, vertical wave of kinetic pressure sun mastery. First form cleaved the air. The shockwave blew a clean, precise hole in the ceiling, leading directly to the weapon room on the 5th floor. "Uraraka! Now!" Uraraka didn't hesitate. She slapped her chest, made herself weightless, and used the updraft from Izuku's attack to rocket through the hole. Ida scrambled to stand, but he was too late. Above them, Uraraka's voice rang out. "Release!" She dropped onto the papier-mâché bomb, hugging it tight. "Hero team wins." The silence in the observation room was heavy, the kind that follows a sudden, violent thunderclap. On the monitors, the dust was settling around the hole in the ceiling where Ochako Uraraka had secured the victory. All Might, standing at the console, cleared his throat. The smile on his face was fixed, but his eyes were sharp, darting between the data readouts and the students. "The MVP of this battle," All Might announced, his voice booming but carrying a serious undertone, "is young Midoriya." The class murmured. It seemed obvious he had physically dominated the fight, but usually, the teachers preferred more traditional heroics. "Can anyone tell me why?" All Might asked, sweeping his gaze across the room. A hand shot up instantly. It was Momo Yaoyorozu. She didn't look at All Might, however. Her eyes were fixed on the screen where Izuku was currently sheathing his blade, the movement crisp and practiced. Because he dictated the entire flow of the engagement without firing a single shot, Momo stated, her voice analytical and crisp. She walked to the front, pointing at the replay frozen on the screen the moment Izuku had intercepted Ida. "Look at his footing," she instructed. Ida-san's recipro burst generates immense kinetic energy. To stop it dead would normally result in equal damage to the blocker. But Midoriya-san didn't block. He absorbed. She traced the line of Izuku's posture on the screen. He dropped his center of gravity and angled his body to ground the force. He acted as a human fulcrum. And then, she tapped the screen where the ceiling had been blown open. That he transferred that stolen momentum into his sword swing. He didn't use his quirk to blow up the ceiling. He used Ida's own speed against the building's structural weak point. Momo turned back to the class, her expression a mix of admiration and slight intimidation. He managed the villain, protected his partner, and secured the objective path in a single sequence. To us. Surgically efficient. Correct. All Might bellowed, giving a thumbs up that seemed to shake the room. Young Midoriya turned defense into offense. A masterful display. In the back of the room, Katsuki Bakugo stood alone against the wall. He wasn't murmuring. He wasn't taking notes. He was vibrating. His teeth were gritted so hard his jaw ached. He watched the screen, watching Death offer a hand to Ida. He didn't use it, Bakugo's mind screamed, a loop of venomous logic. He beat Four Eyes and the octopus without even sparking. He treats us like we're not even worth the heat. To Bakugo, this wasn't restraint. It was arrogance. It was the ultimate insult. Izuku was saying with every silent movement that his base stats were enough to handle the elites of UA. The locker room after the battle trials was filled with the scent of sweat and the buzzing energy of adrenaline. Boys were reenacting their fights, laughing and complaining about sore muscles. Izuku sat on a bench in the corner, methodically disassembling his gear. He detached the tungsten hilt from his belt, wiping a speck of dust from the dark gray metal. His breathing was even. He looked like he had just finished a light jog, not a combat simulation. Midoriya, man. Eijiro Kirishima approached, grinning and showing off his shark-like teeth. That was manly as hell. You stopped Ida like he was a toy car. What kind of training do you do? Basic kinetics, Izuku replied quietly, placing the hilt into its velvet-lined case. And heavy lifting. Heavy lifting? Kirishima laughed. Dude, you gotta show me your routine. The cheerful atmosphere evaporated instantly as the locker room door slammed open. Katsuki Bakugo stood there. He was still in his hero costume, the massive grenade gauntlets looking heavy on his arms. His eyes were shadowed, hidden behind his mask, but the snarl was visible. The chatter died down. Everyone sensed the history, the volatile pressure change in the room. Deku, Bakugo growled. Izuku didn't look up. He continued buttoning his school shirt. We're not in primary school, Bakugo. Use my name or don't speak. Don't give me that crap. Bakugo marched forward, grabbing the front of Izuku's shirt and slamming him back against the lockers. Hey! Bakugo, stop! Kirishima shouted, stepping forward, but Izuku held up a hand to stop him. Izuku looked at Bakugo's trembling fist. He looked into the furious red eyes of his childhood tormentor. You're laughing at me, Bakugo hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed explosions. You have a quirk that can melt stone. You have power that scared the teachers. But you come in here, waving a stick around, beating us with gymnastics? Do you think we're too weak for your fire? Is that it? Yes, Izuku said. The room gasped. It was a cold, brutal admission. Bakugo froze, stunned by the honesty. Izuku slowly peeled Bakugo's fingers off his shirt. His grip was iron, Bakugo couldn't maintain the hold. My quirk, Solar Flare, operates at a core temperature of approximately 5,000 degrees Celsius when active, Izuku recited, his voice monotone, like reading a safety manual. If I used it against Ida in that hallway, I wouldn't have just stopped him. I would have vaporized the oxygen in the corridor. I would have given Uraraka third-degree burns just from the ambient heat. And Ida, there wouldn't be much left of his armor. Izuku stepped forward, forcing Bakugo to take a step back. You want me to use my power, Bakugo? That power is for killing monsters. It is for vaporizing debris that weighs 1,000 tons. It is not for schoolyard wrestling matches. He leaned in, his green eyes dull and terrifyingly calm. I didn't use it because you aren't a threat that requires a sun to burn. You're just a person. And I don't burn people. Bakugo stared at him. For the first time, he understood the gap. It wasn't just strength. It was the scale of existence. Bakugo wanted to be the strongest hero. Izuku was trying not to be a walking natural disaster. You. Bakugo choked out, his pride fracturing. You think you're better than me? I think, Izuku said, picking up his bag and walking past him toward the door, that you are obsessed with being the winner, while I am concerned with not being a murderer. That is why you will never beat me. Izuku walked out of the locker room. Kirishima let out a breath he had been holding. Holy! That was intense. Bakugo stood trembling in the center of the room. Small pops and crackles of nitroglycerin sparked from his palms, uncontrolled and erratic. He didn't chase Izuku. He couldn't. The logic had been too sound, the dismissal too absolute. Outside the school gates, the sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. Izuku walked alone, the heavy tungsten brick in his bag bumping rhythmically against his hip. Midoriya-san. He paused. Momo Yaoyorozu was jogging to catch up to him. She had changed back into her uniform, her ponytail bouncing. She slowed to a walk as she reached him, catching her breath. I heard what happened in the locker room, she said softly. The boys were talking about it. Izuku kept walking. It was a necessary clarification. You called your style, Sun Mastery, on the application forms, Momo said, falling into step beside him. She was clearly trying to bridge the gap, to understand the enigma. My family. We have historical records of various martial arts. But I've never heard of that lineage. You wouldn't have, Izuku said, staring at the horizon. My grandfather invented it. Or rather, he adapted it. Adapted it? Izuku stopped at the crosswalk. My quirk makes my body dense. To contain the heat, my cells are essentially hypercompressed. I weigh 3 times what I look like. Momo's eyes widened. She did a quick mental calculation. That explains the durability. And the impact force. You're a human wrecking ball. Exactly, Izuku nodded. But moving that much mass requires unique leverage. Normal martial arts rely on speed or muscle tension. Sun Mastery relies on centrifugal force and inertia. It's about getting the heavy object moving and then just guiding the crash. He looked at his hand. My grandfather taught me that a sword isn't just a blade. It's a weight. If I swing it, the air pressure alone can cut. I don't need the fire. Momo looked at him, seeing the loneliness in that philosophy. He had built an entire martial art just to avoid unleashing the dangerous power inside him. He was a cage of his own making. It sounds lonely, Momo whispered, holding all that back. Every day. Izuku glanced at her. For a second, the stoic mask slipped, revealing a tired 14-year-old boy. It's better than the alternative, he said softly. The light turned green. See you tomorrow, Yaoyorozu. Momo watched him walk away, his silhouette dark against the setting sun. She realized then that Izuku Midoriya wasn't just strong. He was a tragedy waiting for a safe place to happen. And for some reason, she wanted to be the one to engineer that safety. The days following the battle trial settled into a routine that Izuku found tolerable, if inefficient. The academic curriculum was standard, the heroics classes were practical, and the social dynamics were slowly solidifying around him. He was the strong, silent type, a designation he accepted because it minimized frivolous conversation. However, UA High School had a way of disrupting efficiency. You need to pick a class representative, Aizawa announced from his sleeping bag, sounding as if the mere concept of democracy exhausted him. The classroom exploded into chaos. Everyone wanted the role. Kirishima yelled about manliness, Mina about vibes, and Bakugo simply screamed that he would rule them all. Izuku sat silently, sketching a diagram of a support item in his notebook, a counterbalance weight for his sword arm to account for the drag of the tungsten. He had no interest in leadership. Leadership required speeches, and speeches were a waste of breath. But when the votes were tallied on the chalkboard, the result was undeniable. Izuku Midoriya, 3 votes. Momo Yaoyorozu, 2 votes. Izuku stared at the board. He looked at Uraraka, who was whistling innocently, and then at Ida, who was trembling with frustration but had clearly voted for someone he deemed superior. Izuku walked to the podium. The class went silent, waiting for his acceptance speech. He stood there for 10 seconds, his gaze sweeping over them with unnerving intensity. I will ensure survival rates are maximized in training exercises, Izuku said flatly. That is all. He returned to his seat. That was terrifyingly brief. Kaminari whispered. Lunch at UA was usually a culinary delight, cooked by the hero lunch rush. Izuku sat at a corner table, eating a balanced meal of grilled fish and rice with mechanical precision. Uraraka and Ida sat across from him. "You really are the right choice, Deku-kun," Uraraka chirped. "You're so cool and composed." "I am merely consistent," Izuku corrected, picking a bone from the fish. Ida would have been a more logical choice for administrative duties. "He enjoys the structure." Ida pushed his glasses up. "Nonsense. Your strength and judgment in the battle trial proved your worthiness. I must simply strive to." W.O. The Level 3 security alarm blared, cutting through the chatter. "Security Level 3 breach. All students, evacuate immediately. Panic is a contagion." In seconds, the orderly cafeteria transformed into a stampede of terrified teenagers. Izuku stood up calmly, abandoning his tray. He didn't run. He stepped into the flow of the crowd, his heavy, dense body acting like a breakwater. Students slammed into him and flowed around. He didn't budge an inch. The crushing weight of the crowd pressed in. Uraraka was being shoved sideways. Ida was trying to shout over the din but was drowned out. Izuku scanned the windows. Through the glass, he saw the cause of the breach. It wasn't villains. It was a horde of reporters, flashing cameras and microphones, swarming the front gate. "Media," Izuku muttered. "Inefficient." He looked at the exit sign, then at the panic. If this continued, smaller students would be trampled. He needed a voice, but he wasn't the type to shout. He grabbed Ida by the back of his collar. "Midoriya-kun?" Ida gasped, startled. "Be the voice," Izuku ordered. Without waiting for a response, Izuku pivoted. He channeled his kinetic force into his legs and arms, performing a clean, powerful toss. He launched Tenya Ida armor, engines, and all straight up into the air. Ida soared above the crowd, his engines sputtering to life to stabilize him. He slammed onto the top of the exit archway, grabbing the pipe to hold himself in a pose that looked remarkably like the emergency exit symbol. "Everyone, calm down," Ida roared, his voice booming. "IT is just the media. There is no danger. We are your students. Behave accordingly." The panic broke. The students looked up, saw the situation, and the stampede dissolved into embarrassed shuffling. Izuku watched from the floor, dusting off his uniform. He nodded once. Crisis managed. Later that afternoon, back in Class 1A, Izuku stood at the podium again. "I am resigning," he stated, before Aizawa could even start homeroom. The class blinked. "The cafeteria incident clarified the requirements of this role," Izuku explained. "A leader needs to be a voice that guides the chaos. I am simply a wall that withstands it." Ida Tenya demonstrated the necessary qualities to command a crowd. He looked at Ida. "You stopped the panic. The position is yours." Ida stood up, tears streaming down his face. "Midoriya-kun, to entrust me with this. I will not let you down." "Whatever," Aizawa muttered from the floor. "Just get on the bus. We're going to the unforeseen simulation joint." The bus ride to the USJ was cramped. Izuku sat near the back, his Bakken case resting between his legs. "Midoriya-chan," a voice croaked. Izuku looked up. Tsuyu Azui was staring at him with unblinking, inquisitive eyes. "I say everything that comes to my mind," she said bluntly. "Your quirk. You call it solar flare, right?" "Yes. But you never use it," Tsuyu continued. "You're super strong like All Might, but All Might is always smiling and flashy. You're scared. You fight like you're trying to end things before they start. Why don't you use the fire?" The bus went quiet. Everyone was curious. Even Bakugo, sitting a few rows up, stiffened, listening. Izuku looked at his hand, the hand that held the tungsten brick, the hand that had melted a crayon and terrified a classroom years ago. "All Might is a symbol of peace," Izuku said quietly. "He saves people by inspiring hope. He smiles to tell them everything will be okay." He looked up, meeting Tsuyu's gaze. His eyes were dark. "I am not a symbol. I am a solution. My fire doesn't inspire hope. It removes matter. It turns threats into ash." He paused, the silence in the bus heavy and thick. I don't use it because a hero's job is to protect people, Izuku finished. And you don't use a nuclear weapon to stop a mugger. I will only unsheathe the sun when the target is a monster, something that cannot be saved, only destroyed. Tsuyu blinked. That's Vince. Ribbit. The bus jolted to a stop. We're here, Aizawa announced. They filed out into the massive dome of the USJ. The space hero, 13, greeted them and began a lecture on the dangers of quirks. It was a speech about rescue, about how power can easily kill if unchecked. Izuku listened intently. It was a philosophy he lived by every second of every day. But the lesson was interrupted. The lights in the massive facility flickered and died. The fountain in the center of the plaza sputtered. And then, a purple vortex tore open the air. Aizawa spun around, his eyes widening. Gather together. Don't move. 13, protect the students. What is that? Kirishima asked, squinting. Is this the simulation? Has it started? Don't move. Aizawa shouted, putting on his goggles. Those are real villains. Below them, a horde of thugs poured out of the warp gate. In the center stood a man covered in hands, scratching his neck, and beside him, Izuku's breath hitched. Beside the handman stood a creature. It was massive, with black skin, an exposed brain, and a beak filled with rows of jagged teeth. It stood perfectly still, not out of Dieston, but out of a complete lack of will. It was an emptiness. A void of humanity wrapped in bioengineered muscle. Izuku felt a sensation he hadn't felt in years. The heavy tungsten brick in his mind, the weight of his restraint suddenly felt lighter. While the rest of the class trembled in fear of the unknown, Izuku stared at the creature with a cold, terrifying clarity. It has no soul, Izuku analyzed, his hand drifting to the hilt of his weapon. It is not a person. It is a weapon. Aizawa leaped down the stairs, engaging the villains in a flurry of capture tape and martial arts. But Izuku didn't watch his teacher. He watched the monster. Finally, Izuku whispered, the sound lost in the commotion of the terrified students. His thumb clicked the guard of his tungsten hilt, pushing the blade out just a fraction of an inch. A faint, nearly invisible shimmer of heat warped the air around the scabbard. A target I don't have to save. The world dissolved into swirling purple mist, and gravity seemed to lose its hold. Izuku didn't panic. He simply held his breath and braced his core, preparing for impact. He slammed onto rocky terrain, his heavy boots cracking the stone beneath him. He was no longer at the entrance. He scanned his surroundings instantly. High elevation. Jagged cliffs. Sparse vegetation. The mountain zone. Oh, what just happened? A voice groaned nearby. Izuku turned to see Denki Kaminari picking himself up from a dirt patch. Beside him, Momo Yaoyorozu and Kyokajiro were getting to their feet, looking shaken but unharmed. We've been separated, Izuku stated, his voice cutting through their confusion. The warp villain's quirk has displacement properties. We are likely surrounded. As if on cue, shadows emerged from behind the crags and boulders. 24 villains thugs with mismatched quirks ranging from rock skin to elongated limbs stepped into the light, grinning maliciously. Jackpot, one of them sneered, brandishing a rusty pipe. We got a bunch of kids. Easy pickings. Jiro plugged her earphone jacks into her boots, her face pale. There are so many of them. Kaminari, can you call for backup? Kaminari tapped his earpiece. No good. The signal is jammed. I can try to shock them, but... He looked at his teammates, then at the encircling villains. If I let loose enough voltage to take them out, I'll fry you guys too. Momo grit her teeth, her skin glowing as she began to create a metal staff. I can create weapons, but we need time to formulate a strategy. Midoriya-san, what do we? She stopped. Izuku had stepped forward. He wasn't looking at the villains with fear. He was looking at the wind direction. Yaoyorozu, Izuku said, his back to her. Create insulated blankets. Thick ones. And cover yourselves. What? Momo blinked. Why? Because, Izuku said, his hand moving to the tungsten hilt at his hip. I am going to change the atmospheric pressure. The lead villain laughed. You think you can scare us, kid? Get him. The horde charged. Izuku didn't draw his sword fully. He didn't need to. He simply clicked the guard with his thumb, exposing a single inch of the blade. Sun mastery, heat haze. It wasn't an explosion. It was a sigh of the sun. A wave of intense, shimmering heat erupted from the gap in the scabbard. It didn't spread like fire. It moved like a heavy, invisible liquid. The air around Izuku instantly warped, turning into a kaleidoscope of refracted light. The charging villains stumbled. Their vision swam as the heat mirage distorted the distance between them and their target. The oxygen in their immediate vicinity thinned, replaced by searing, dry heat that scorched their lungs with every breath. "It's too hot," one villain gasped, dropping his weapon to clutch his throat. "I can't see him." Izuku moved. Veiled within the shimmering distortion, he was a ghost. He appeared in front of the lead villain, not as a solid form, but as a blur of kinetic violence. He didn't use the blade to cut, he used the heavy scabbard like a club. The leader was launched backward into 3 others, the impact sounding like a car crash. Izuku spun, the heat wave trailing him like a cape. He wasn't burning them directly, but the sheer thermal radiation was exhausting them, sapping their stamina in seconds. "Kaminari! Now!" Izuku barked. "The heat has ionized the air above them. Your electricity will conduct through the heated pockets." Kaminari didn't understand the science, but he understood the order. "You got it. 1.3 million volts." He fired a bolt of electricity. Instead of scattering wildly, the lightning arc snapped to the superheated trails Izuku had left behind, chaining between the villains with pinpoint accuracy while leaving the students protected by the cooler air behind Izuku completely untouched. The villains collapsed in a smoking, twitching heap. Silence returned to the mountain, save for the crackle of cooling rock. Izuku clicked the sword back into the sheath fully. The shimmering mirage vanished instantly, the temperature dropping back to normal. Momo lowered the thick blanket she had created, staring at Izuku's back. She was trembling. It wasn't fear of the villains. It was the heat she had felt radiating from him, even from 20 feet away. It was a suffocating, absolute power that he kept locked inside a metal box. He wasn't protecting himself from them, she realized, watching steam rise from his shoulders. He was protecting us from him. "Midoriya-san." Momo started, taking a step forward. "That heat. If you had drawn that sword fully, we would be ash," Izuku finished, turning to face her. His expression was as stoic as ever, but there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Are you injured?" Momo shook her head, her cheeks flushing slightly. "No. Thanks to your restraint." "Good." Izuku walked to the edge of the cliff. "We need to assess the situation at the central plaza." The 3 students joined him at the precipice. The view was a nightmare. Down in the plaza, Shota Aizawa was losing. The black, beak-faced monster the Nomu was straddling the teacher, smashing his head into the concrete with sickening force. Aizawa's arms were twisted at unnatural angles. "Sensei!" Jiro screamed, covering her mouth. Izuku's hands clenched the railing until the metal groaned. The monster, he had sensed earlier. The thing with no soul. It was dismantling his teacher like a broken toy. "Kaminari, Jiro," Izuku said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming cold and metallic. "Stay here and guard Yaoyorozu. Do not engage." "Wait, Midoriya," Kaminari shouted. "You can't go down there. That thing is breaking Aizawa like a twig. What can you do?" Izuku didn't answer. He looked at Momo. She saw it in his eyes. The efficiency was gone. The restraint was wavering. For the first time, she saw the fire behind the green emeralds. "Midoriya-san," she whispered, grabbing his sleeve. "Please, be careful. Don't lose yourself." Izuku looked at her hand on his arm, then met her gaze. He gently removed her hand. "I won't," he said. "I'm just going to work." He stepped off the cliff. He didn't slide down. He fell, a dark plummet toward the chaos below. As he fell, his hand gripped the tungsten hilt, and this time, he didn't just click the guard. He prepared to draw. Gravity accelerated Izuku's dense, 300-pound frame into a terminal velocity dive. The wind roared in his ears, but his mind was silent. Below him, the scene was a tableau of cruelty, the Nomu raising a massive fist to deliver a skull-crushing blow to the unconscious Aizawa. Izuku didn't scream. He didn't announce his arrival. He simply rotated his body, feet driving downward, and slammed into the pavement of the central plaza. The impact was seismic. The concrete floor of the US didn't just crack, it cratered. A shockwave of dust and debris blasted outward, forcing the Nomu to recoil, shielding its exposed brain. Shigaraki Tamura, scratching his neck frantically, stumbled back. What? Another NPC? Where did he drop from? The dust cloud was thick, but a sound cut through it, a sound like a high-tension cable snapping, followed by the hiss of water instantly turning to steam. Shining. A bright, blinding white light pierced the dust. Izuku Midoriya stepped out of the crater. His stance was wide, his breathing rhythmic. In his right hand, the tungsten blade was finally, fully drawn. It was terrifying. The metal wasn't just hot, it was incandescent. The blade glowed with a blinding white-gold radiance, the air around it rippling so violently that reality seemed to warp. The water in the nearby flood zone began to bubble and hiss simply from the ambient thermal radiation. "Get away from Sensei," Izuku said. His voice was no longer flat. It was burning. Shigaraki laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "A sword? You think a piece of metal can stop the anti-symbol of peace? Nomu. Crush him." The Nomu screeched, launching itself forward with speed that defied physics. It was a blur of black muscle and kinetic force. Izuku didn't move his feet. He watched the massive fist coming toward his face, a punch that could level a building. Shock absorption, Izuku analyzed in a split second. Blunt force is inefficient. I must remove the limb. Sun mastery, second form, solar prominence. Izuku swung. He didn't swing to block. He swung to intersect. The tungsten blade met the Nomu's wrist. There was no clang of metal on bone. There was only the wet, sizzling sound of meat vaporizing. The blade passed through the Nomu's arm like it was made of smoke. The massive fist, severed clean off, flew past Izuku's head and embedded itself in the wall behind him. The Nomu shrieked a sound of confusion rather than pain and stumbled back. "What?" Shigaraki froze, his hand leaving his neck. "It cut him." "Regenerate that," Izuku challenged cold. The Nomu's stump bubbled. Pink muscle fibers tried to reach out, to knit themselves back together. But the moment they touched the surface of the wound, they turned black and crumbled to ash. The heat of the blade was so intense it hadn't just cut, it had instantly cauterized the wound on a cellular level, burning the nerve endings and boiling the regenerative cells before they could activate. "Cheater!" Shigaraki whispered, his eyes widening in manic fury. "You're cheating. He has super regeneration. You can't just burn it off." Izuku ignored the villain. He stepped over Aizawa's broken body, placing himself as the sole barrier between the monster and his teacher. "It's a biological weapon," Izuku stated, raising the glowing blade into a high guard. "It has no soul. It has no rights. It is merely an obstacle." The Nomu, driven by simple programming, attacked again with its remaining arm. It swiped low, trying to crush Izuku. Izuku leaped not high, but horizontally. He spun in the air, the centrifugal force of his heavy body adding terrified momentum to his swing. Slash. The Nomu's left leg was severed at the knee. The monster collapsed, crashing into the concrete. Again, the wound smoked and blackened, refusing to heal. Izuku landed softly, the heat from his sword causing the very ground beneath his boots to turn into molten slag. He walked toward the crawling, screeching creature. Up on the cliffside, Momo Yaoyorozu watched through a pair of binoculars she had created. Her hands were trembling, but she couldn't look away. The heat radiating from him was palpable even from this distance, but what struck her most was the control. He wasn't raging. He was dismantling a nightmare with the precision of a surgeon. "He's overwhelming it," Momo thought, her heart racing. "He's not just strong. He's absolute." Down below, Shigaraki was panicking. He scratched his neck violently, drawing blood. No, no, no. This is wrong. Kurogyri. Save the Noma. We can't lose the asset. Izuku stood over the crippled beast. He looked down into the exposed brain, seeing nothing but artificial aggression. The tungsten brick in his mind, the DS-bin, told him that leaving this creature alive was a statistical error. He raised the sword high, aiming the white-hot point directly at the creature's exposed brainstem. Rest, Izuku whispered. He moved the blade down. Whoosh. A black void opened instantly beneath the Nomu. The blade stabbed into empty concrete, melting a hole straight through the floor, but the monster was gone. We are retreating, Shigaraki. Kurogyri's voice boomed as the mist expanded to swallow the hand-villain. The student. He is a natural counter to the creation. We cannot win this engagement. I'll kill you. Shigaraki screamed, staring at Izuku with pure, unadulterated hatred as the portal closed around him. I'll remember you, Sunblade. Next time, I'll bring something that doesn't burn. And then they were gone. Izuku stood alone in the silence. The water in the flood zone stopped boiling. The air began to cool. Bang! The main doors of the USJ burst open. I am here. All Might roared, tearing off his tie, his face contorted with fury and worry. I had a bad feeling, so I rushed. He stopped. He looked at the villains. Or rather, the lack of them. He looked at the unconscious Aizawa, battered but alive. He looked at the cratered floor, the melted slag, and the severed Nomu arm still smoking in the wall. And finally he looked at Izuku. Izuku slowly pulled his sword from the concrete. The glow began to fade, the white turning to a dull, angry cherry red. He pulled a cloth from his pouch and wiped the hot metal, the cloth singing slightly, before sheathing the blade with a sharp click. All Might walked down the stairs, his steps heavy. He looked around the plaza, processing the aftermath of a battle that should have killed a pro-hero. Young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice quiet, lacking its usual performative volume. Did you do this? Izuku turned. His eyes were dull again, the fire locked back away. The primary threat was neutralized, Izuku reported, his tone flat. However, the leaders escaped due to my lack of speed. I failed to secure the capture. All Might stared at the boy. He saw the melted ground. He saw the brutal efficiency of the severed limb. A drop of sweat rolled down the symbol of Peace's forehead. He realized, with a sudden chill, that if he hadn't arrived, Izuku wouldn't have needed saving. Izuku had been the one doing the saving. You saved Aizawa, All Might said, placing a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. He felt the heat still radiating off the boy's body like standing next to a furnace. You held the line. Good work. Izuku looked at All Might's hand, then gave a stiff nod. It was the logical course of action. As the sirens of the police force finally approached in the distance, Izuku let out a long, slow breath. The monster was gone. The sword was sheathed. But the scar on the USJ floor, a permanent burn mark in the concrete, remained as proof of what happened when the sun was finally unsheathed. The return to UA High School was less of a morning commute and more of a red carpet event. Reporters swarmed the gates, desperate for a glimpse of the students who had survived the villain alliance. But they were specifically hunting one rumor, the student who defeated the anti-symbol of peace. Is it true he glows? I heard he cut a building in half. I heard he eats gravel for breakfast. Izuku Midoriya walked through the crowd. He didn't hide. He simply walked with such heavy, rhythmic purpose that the reporters instinctively parted like water around a moving ship. He didn't answer questions. He just gave a polite nod and kept moving. Inside Class 1A, the atmosphere was electric. Dude! Kaminari shouted, throwing an arm around Izuku's shoulders the moment he walked in. You're trending. Sunblade student is the #1 topic. They're making fan art of you. Kirishima flexed his arm. That sword move was so manly, Midoriya. You gotta teach me how to swing like that. Even the usually reserved students were staring. Izuku sat at his desk, setting his bag down with a heavy thud. It was just a practical application of thermodynamics, Izuku said calmly, pulling out a textbook. Don't be so modest. Mina Ishido cheered, leaning over his desk. You totally wrecked that bird monster. You're like the strongest in the class now. Slam. Bakugo kicked his desk, the explosion popping loudly. Shut up. He just got a lucky matchup. Don't think you're ahead of me, Deku. Izuku didn't even look up. Before Bakugo could detonate, the door opened. Aizawa walked in, fully bandaged like a mummy. Morning, Aizawa mumbled through the bandages. Your fight isn't over yet. The UA Sports Festival is approaching. The class erupted in excitement. This was their chance to be scouted. However, Aizawa said, silencing them with a glare. There is a concern regarding equipment. Usually, support items are banned unless they are part of your body. Midoriya. The room turned to Izuku. Your sword, Aizawa said. The board is debating it. It's considered a lethal weapon. Izuku stood up. The class held its breath. Would he argue? Would he demand his gear? I will not use the blade, Izuku stated simply. Aizawa paused. Oh. Using the blade against students would be unsportsmanlike, Izuku said, his voice level. The heat is difficult to regulate non-lethally against soft targets. If I used it, the matches would end in seconds, and the other students would require skin grafts. That is poor entertainment. He gestured to the tungsten hilt at his hip. I will carry the weighted hilt and scabbard to maintain my center of gravity training, but I will not draw the weapon. I will fight the tournament only unarmed. The class stared at him. It was the ultimate flex. I'm not using my weapon because I don't want to accidentally melt you. Bakugo looked like he was going to have an aneurysm. You're looking down on us again. I am ensuring fair play, Izuku corrected, sitting back down. Try to keep up. During the lunch break, Izuku headed to the support department. He needed to check the structural integrity of his scabbard after the high heat discharge at the USJ. He opened the heavy steel doors. Boom. An explosion of pink smoke greeted him. Success. The baby didn't explode, it just expanded aggressively. A manic voice cheered. Izuku waved the smoke away to see a girl with pink dreadlocks and zoom lens eyes caked in soot. Mei Hatsum. Excuse me, Izuku said. I need a stress test on a tungsten alloy. Hatsum froze. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto the dark gray metal at his hip. Tungsten. She zoomed in. Does that? High-density, heat-treated, military-grade tungsten. She was in his personal space in a millisecond, her hands hovering over the hilt. Look at this beautiful baby. It's so heavy. How do you even walk with this? It must weigh 50 pounds. 60, Izuku corrected. And I need you to check the locking mechanism. It rattled slightly during the Nomu engagement. You're the Sunblade guy. Hatsum shrieked, grabbing a wrench. I saw the news. The heat output was gorgeous. Let me strip it down. Let me add boosters. Let me add a jetpack. Just the maintenance, please, Izuku said, effectively playing the straight man to her chaos. As Hatsum worked and drooled over the metal, the door opened again. Uraraka and Ida walked in. Deku-kun. Uraraka waved. We figured you'd be here. We came to declare our intentions. Ida said, chopping the air. Midoriya. Even though you are clearly superior in combat, we will not hand you the victory. We will do our best to defeat you. Izuku leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. A rare, small smile touched his lips. Good, Izuku said. If you didn't try to win, it would be boring. Come at me with everything you have. Hatsum popped up from behind the workbench. Done. I polished it, reinforced the latch, and I may have added a small gyroscopic stabilizer to the pommel. Free of charge. Just advertise my babies during the festival. Izuku accepted the hilt. It felt perfect. Deal. The school day ended, but Izuku didn't head home. He had received a note in his shoe locker. Gym Gamma. Please. Yaoyorozu. He walked into the massive concrete gym to find Momo Yaoyorozu waiting. She was wearing her P uniform, looking determined but nervous. Midoriya-san, she bowed slightly. Thank you for coming. You asked for training, Izuku said, dropping his bag. You have excellent quirk utility, Yaoyorozu. Why do you need me? Momo clenched her fists. Because I panic. At the USJ. I hesitated. I made a blanket while you fought a monster. I have the intelligence to create anything, but I lack the decisiveness to use it. Your style. Sun mastery. It is pure decisiveness. Please, teach me the basics. Izuku studied her. He saw the potential. She was a genius, but she overthought every move. Okay, Izuku said. He walked over to her. The first lesson of sun mastery isn't about heat. It's about weight. He stood behind her, adjusting her stance. Widen your feet. Lower your hips. You are too light. You think too much, so your center of gravity floats up to your head. Momo flushed bright red as his hands adjusted her shoulders. He was close. Very close. Ground yourself, Izuku instructed, his voice calm near her ear. Don't think about what to create. Think about where you are. Be a mountain. Suddenly, the gym doors slammed open. Well. If it isn't Class 1A. Nito Monoma from Class 1B strutted in, followed by a reluctant Kendo. I heard the Sunblade is here, Monoma sneered. I just came to see if the rumors are true, or if you're just arrogant show-offs who think. Izuku didn't turn around. He didn't stop adjusting Momo's stance. He simply raised his right hand, pointed 2 fingers toward the door and flicked. Snap. A bullet of compressed air pressure generated purely by the ridiculous speed of his fingers shot across the gym. It whizzed right past Monoma's ear, ruffling his hair violently, and slammed into the metal door frame with a loud clang, leaving a dent. Monoma froze, his mouth open. Focus, Yairozu, Izuku said softly to Momo, ignoring the intruder completely. Ignore the noise. Eyes forward. Momo looked at Monoma, who was currently pale and shaking, and then back at Izuku's calm profile. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but for the first time, it wasn't from anxiety. Yes, sensei, she whispered, a confident smile breaking through. Kendo grabbed the frozen Monoma by the collar. Sorry for the intrusion. We're leaving. She dragged him out. Now, Izuku said, stepping back. Try to hit me. Momo created a bow staff. She looked at the boy who could flick air like a bullet, who voluntarily handicapped himself to give everyone else a chance, and who was currently looking at her with genuine expectation. She gripped the staff. She wouldn't let him down. Here I come. Hey everyone. I thought I should shift the tone to more comedy and hype moments. I was planning on making people fear Izuku's willingness to kill easily and how that could potentially be an issue in the making. But for a power fantasy, I felt like it was too much. That's also why I changed the ending slightly for chapter. It's been so long since I actually worked on this series. I honestly hate how low-key annoying Izuku is. He keeps repeating himself and acts like a calculator. Actually, sounding but. That's why I shifted his personality to sound less like a calculator and more like a confident, perhaps slightly arrogant, prodigy who is simply bored because he's that strong. I guess you could tell hope y'all like this new direction cause I am keeping it. The waiting room for Class 1A was a pressure cooker of anxiety. The UA Sports Festival was the biggest event in the country, televised to millions. Izuku sat on a bench, one leg crossed over the other, eyes. He wasn't meditating, he was napping. The nervous energy of the room was too loud to ignore completely, but he was trying his best. Man, I'm gonna puke, Mineta groaned, clutching his stomach. Midoriya. Ida marched over, chopping his hand frantically. Are you truly prepared? To fight without drawing your blade is a massive handicap. You are taking this too lightly. Izuku cracked one eye open. Relax, Ida. The sword is just a hunk of metal. I'm the weapon. Besides, it wouldn't be fair if I brought a supernova to a fistfight. Suddenly, the door creaked open. But it wasn't a teacher. A face with wide, inquisitive blue eyes and long periwinkle hair floated into the room, defying gravity. She drifted right past a stunned Ida and hovered inches from Izuku's face. Hey, are you him? You're the sun boy, right? The one who melted the bird monster. Izuku blinked, leaning back to avoid a collision. You're in my breathing room. The girl and upperclassman wearing the UA gym uniform poked his cheek. Your skin feels normal. I heard you were super hot. Like literally hot. And why is your sword so dark? Is it obsidian? Can I touch it? Do your freckles glow when you power up? You ask a lot of questions, Izuku sighed, pushing her hand away gently. And no touching the merchandise. Nijire-chan, stop harassing the first years, a voice called from the hallway. But Mirio, look at him. He's so dense. The girl, Nijire Hado, floated around Izuku like a curious satellite. My horns are tingling. You're really strong, aren't you? Before Izuku could answer, a hand firmly interposed itself between Nijire and Izuku. Momo Yaoyorozu stood there, her posture perfect, though her expression was a mix of politeness and territorial annoyance. Excuse me, senpai, Momo said, her voice dripping with forced courtesy. Midoriya-san is trying to focus. Maybe you can interrogate him later? Nijire blinked, looking between Momo and Izuku. A mischievous grin spread across her face. Oh? Protecting him? Are you his girlfriend? Or his bodyguard? Momo turned bright red. I am his classmate and his training partner. Nijire giggled, floating back toward the door where a blonde upperclassman, Mirio Togata, was waving her over. Okay. Good luck, son boy. I'll be watching you. She zipped away. She's a handful, Izuku noted, watching the door close. He looked at Momo. Thanks for the save. Momo let out a breath, smoothing her uniform. She was invasive. You need to be careful, Midoriya. Some people have no sense of boundaries. Midoriya. The cool voice cut through the lingering awkwardness. Shoto Todoroki stood at the other end of the room. Objectively speaking, Todoroki said, you are stronger than me. You defeated the Nomu alone. All Might has his eyes on you. Izuku met his gaze, resting his chin on his hand. And? I'm going to beat you, Todoroki declared. I'm going to prove that I can win without using my left side. And I'll beat you even with that handicap you put on yourself. Izuku stood up, grabbing his heavy scabbard. He looked Todoroki up and down, unimpressed. You're purposely fighting with half your power? Izuku scoffed, shaking his head. That's not noble, Todoroki. It's just inefficient. If you hold back against me, you'll lose. Don't trip on your own ice. He walked past him. We're up. The stadium was deafening. Fireworks exploded, the crowd roared, and Present Mike screamed until his throat was surely bleeding. Representing the students, from Class 1, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku walked up to the microphone. The crowd went silent, waiting for a speech from the Nomu Slayer. Izuku leaned into the mic, looking out at the thousands of screaming fans. I promised not to use my blade, he said, his voice echoing across the stadium. So I'm just going to walk to the finish line. Try not to get run over. The crowd erupted. It was arrogant, it was cool, and it was exactly what they wanted. And now, the first event. The obstacle race. The gate opened. It was a bottleneck. Students shoved and pushed. Todoroki instantly froze the ground, trapping dozens of students and skating ahead. Too easy. Todoroki muttered. Crunch. The ice behind him shattered. Izuku Midoriya didn't skate. He ran. His boots, heavy with his immense density, smashed through the ice with every step, finding traction where there was none. He was a bulldozer in a skating rink. Amazing! Midoriya isn't slowed down at all. He's just crushing the ice. Present Mike screamed. Then the shadows fell. The Zero-Pointer's massive, building-sized robots blocked the path. Todoroki froze one in a precarious position, slipping under it as it fell to block the others. The robot groaned, tilting to fall on the students behind. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't dodge. He reached down to his hip, gripping the sheathed tungsten sword. He didn't draw it. He treated the 60-pound metal scabbard like a baseball bat. Out of my way. He swung the scabbard upward. The impact sounded like a cannon firing. The tungsten sheath slammed into the center chassis of the falling robot. The sheer physical power of the swing, backed by Izuku's superhuman weight, didn't just stop the fall. It knocked the giant robot backward. The metal behemoth flew up and back, crashing onto the other robots behind it, clearing a massive, open highway for everyone. He cleared the path with a sheathed sword. He didn't even cut it. He just slapped it away. The race continued. Izuku cleared the canyon by simply jumping his leg strength, launching him like a flea. Finally, they reached the third obstacle. The minefield. Bakugo and Todoroki were in the lead, but they had slowed down. They were stepping carefully, eyes scanning the dirt for disturbed earth. "Get out of my way, icy hot!" Bakugo yelled, blasting a mine to propel himself. Then, they heard a rhythmic thumping sound behind them. They turned. Their eyes widened. Izuku Midoriya was sprinting. Full speed. "He's not stopping?" Bakugo gasped. "He'll blow himself up." Izuku stepped directly onto a landmine. Boom. Pink smoke and fire exploded upward. But Izuku didn't fly into the air. He didn't fall. He just kept running. His body was so dense, his center of gravity so rooted, and his durability so high that the mines designed to knock over a normal 150 pounds student washed over him like a stiff breeze. He ran through the explosions, the fire liking at his gym uniform but failing to slow his momentum. Boom, boom, boom. He was a juggernaut. A human tank ignoring the artillery. Bakugo and Todoroki stared in horror as Izuku sprinted right between them, shrouded in smoke and dust, his face completely expressionless. "On your left," Izuku smirked as he passed them. "Don't mock me." Bakugo screamed, abandoning caution to chase him. But it was too late. Izuku tore through the final stretch, triggering every mine in his path just to clear them, and crossed the finish line. Winner, Izuku Midoriya. The stadium shook with applause. Up in the stands, Nijire Hato was gripping the railing, her eyes sparkling with intense fascination. "Did you see that, Mirio? He didn't even flinch. The explosions just bounced off him." She turned to Tamaki, who was hiding his face. "I want to know how his skin works. I'm going to talk to him again." Down on the field, Momo Yaoyorozu crossed the line in a respectable position. She watched Izuku dusting soot off his shoulder as if he had just walked through a spiderweb, not a minefield. She smiled, shaking her head. He really is an unstoppable object. 10 million points. Midnight shouted, cracking her whip. The student who placed first is worth a fortune. It's survival of the fittest, and the man at the top is the target. Izuku stood at the center of the field, the heavy headband tied around his forehead. The entire student body was glaring at him like a pack of starving wolves. "Everyone is going to come for us," Uraraka said, walking up to him. She looked determined. "But I'm sticking with you, Deku-kun. Even if it's scary." "I have a proposition." A manic voice cut in. Mei Hatsum appeared, holding a box of gears. "Mr. Sunblade, your performance with my tungsten baby was adequate. Let me join you. I need a high-profile mannequin to show off my babies to the corporate scouts." Izuku looked at the pink-haired inventor, then at Uraraka. He needed one more. "Yaoyorozu," Izuku called out. Momo, who was looking for a team, froze. She turned to face him. "Join me," Izuku said simply. "I need someone who can adapt to anything." Momo's eyes widened. The top student was asking for her. Yes. I won't let you down." The team was set. Rider, Izuku Midoriya. Front horse, Momo Yaoyorozu. Left wing, Ochako Uraraka. Right wing, Mei Hatsum. "So, what's the plan?" Uraraka asked nervously as the timer counted down. "Do we run? Try to lose them in the crowd." Izuku climbed onto their shoulders. He felt heavy, nearly 300 pounds of dense muscle and bone, but Uraraka tapped him with her fingertips. "Zero gravity," she chirped. Instantly, Izuku became weightless. The girls adjusted their grip easily. "We don't run," Izuku said, crossing his arms and looking out at the hungry mob. "Running implies we're afraid of losing. We're going to stand right here." "Right here?" Hatsum blinked. "But my jetpacks are designed for high-speed evasion." "We won't need them for speed," Izuku corrected. "Just stability. We are the fortress." Let them break themselves against the walls. Start. The signal fired. Instantly, the mob charged. Team Tetsu, Team Hagakure, Team Mineta, everyone rushed the center. Get him. Target the 10 million. Izuku didn't flinch. He sat atop his team like a bored king on a throne. Defensive formation, Izuku ordered calmly. First came the invisible threat. Mizo Shoji charged, his tentacle arms creating a wall to hide Toru Hagakure. The invisible girl leaped, aiming to snatch the headband while Izuku was distracted. Sneak attacks don't work if you breathe that loudly, Izuku murmured. He didn't look. He simply raised his left hand, feeling the displacement of the air. With a casual backhand flick, he slapped the empty air. Ow! Toru cried out as the air pressure knocked her backward into Shoji's arms. They tumbled away. Bakugo is incoming at 6 o'clock, Izuku stated. Deku. Katsuki Bakugo launched himself off Siro's tape, flying through the air with explosions popping from his palms. He was a missile of pure rage, aiming directly for Izuku's face. Don't get cocky. Bakugo roared, reaching for the headband. Izuku sighed. You're too loud. He reached out. Not to block, but to catch. His hand, reinforced by his immense density, snapped forward and grabbed Bakugo by the face. The explosion detonated against Izuku's palm, but Izuku's arm didn't even shake. Go away, Izuku said. With a simple flex of his tricep, Izuku threw Bakugo. He didn't just push him, he launched him. Bakugo flew backward across the arena, tumbling mid-air to correct his course before crashing back onto his own team. He caught him. Present Mike screamed. Midoriya just swatted Bakugo like a fly. And Team Midoriya hasn't moved a single inch from the start line. Midoriya's an ice is coming, Momo warned, creating a thick metal plating to protect their legs. Shoto Todoroki was sliding toward them, his team, Ida, Kaminari, Yaoyorozu's rival Kendo, moving fast. A massive wave of ice surged forward to freeze them in place. Hatsum, stabilizers, Izuku ordered. You got it. Hatsum activated the hover saws on the girls' boots, lifting them just an inch off the ground so they wouldn't be frozen to the floor. Izuku gripped his sheathed tungsten sword. Yaoyorozu, shield the team. Momo created a dome over the girls. Izuku swung the scabbard downward. Crush. The blunt force impact shattered the ice wave into a million sparkling diamonds. The shockwave cleared the air around them, leaving Team Midoriya hovering untouched in a circle of broken frost. Is that all? Izuku asked, looking down at Todoroki. Up in the stands, Nijire Hato was kicking her feet excitedly, leaning over the railing. Look at him, Mirio. He's like a castle. He's just letting them attack and saying, nope. It's so cool. Mirio crossed his arms, smiling. He trusts his team completely. He handles the offense, they handle the stability. It's a perfect defense. Back in the arena, the timer was ticking down. 10 seconds. Todoroki narrowed his eyes. Ida. Do it. Recipro burst. Ida's engines turned blue. In a split second, Team Todoroki vanished, reappearing right next to Izuku. Todoroki reached out, his hand inches from the 10 million point headband. Too slow, Izuku whispered. He didn't dodge. He leaned forward, intercepting Todoroki's hand with his own forearm. The grab was deflected. The momentum carried Team Todoroki past them. Time's up. The buzzer sounded. The dust settled. Team Midoriya was standing exactly where they had started the match. They hadn't taken a single step. They hadn't lost a single point. Izuku hopped down from the formation. He adjusted his headband, looking at the exhausted, panting students surrounding him. Good warm-up, Izuku said, stretching his neck. Momo looked at him, her heart pounding. She had spent the entire match literally supporting him, and he had spent the entire match ensuring nothing touched her. We really didn't move, Uraraka cheered, high-fiving Hatsum. We were unstoppable. Izuku picked up his scabbard and walked toward the tunnel. He passed a fuming Bakugo and a silent Todoroki. See you in the finals, Izuku said, not bothering to look back. Kinda short but hoped y'all liked it. I kind of regret making Izuku dense, literally dense, not personality dense. 'Cause he weighs like 300 pounds? So, people being able to lift him is a big no-no. Thank you, Rarika. Also, side note, thanks to it being Christmas break, I have way too much free time. I already have 10 plus chapters ready to go. Oh, I need a life and more friends and a girlfriend. The lunch rush was a chaotic symphony of chatter and clattering trays. Team Midoriya had secured a large table near the window, a fortress of calm amidst the storm of excited students. To the unstoppable fortress. Mei Hatsum cheered, clinking her soda can against Urarika's tea. My babies performed magnificently. Did you see the sheer structural integrity of the formation? Corporate scouts are definitely taking notes. We were amazing. Urarika beamed, digging into her rice. I didn't think we'd actually hold off everyone without moving. Izuku sat quietly in the center, eating his grilled fish with mechanical precision. He seemed content to let the girls handle the celebration, his mind already drifting to the bracket matchups. Hey, son boy. A familiar blur of periwinkle hair dropped from the ceiling literally and landed right on the edge of their table. Nijire Hato beamed at them, ignoring the laws of gravity and personal space. Senpai! Momo gasped, instinctively shifting her chair closer to Izuku. Nijire leaned in, her eyes wide and sparkling. I saw the cavalry battle. You didn't even sweat. Is that because your internal temperature is too high? Does your blood boil? If I poked you with a thermometer, would it melt? She reached out a finger to poke Izuku's cheek. Momo's hand intercepted Nijire's wrist with polite but firm speed. Hato-senpai, Momo said, her smile tight. Please refrain from poking Midoriya-san while he is eating. Digestion requires a stress-free environment. Oh, you're so protective. Nijire giggled, not offended in the least. She floated sideways, hovering over Izuku's other shoulder. So, tell me, does your hair glow? Do you have to eat coal to fuel the fire? Can you breathe fire? Izuku chewed, swallowed, and wiped his mouth. No. And only if I eat spicy food. Nijire gasped. Really? That's a joke, right? You made a joke. Hato-senpai, Momo interjected again, physically standing up to block Nijire's view. Perhaps you should return to your own year? The third years must be wondering where you are. Nijire pouted, floating upside down. You're no fun, Yairose-chan. I just want to know how he works. He's a mystery. He is a student trying to eat lunch, Momo countered, standing like a sentinel. Nijire laughed, drifting away towards a waving Mirio. Fine. I'll ask more later. Good luck, son boy. Izuku watched her leave. She has a lot of energy. She is a menace, Momo sighed, sitting back down and smoothing her skirt. I will ensure she doesn't disturb your preparations. Izuku looked at her, a faint amusement in his eyes. You're good at defense, Yaoyorozu. Momo flushed pink. I simply wish for fairness. Just as the atmosphere settled, Ojiro approached the table, looking hesitant. He had withdrawn from the tournament, his pride wounded by Shinso's quirk. Midoriya-san. Sorry to interrupt. But my opponent. Hitoshi Shinso. Be careful. Izuku set down his chopsticks. The brainwasher? Yes, Ojiro nodded grimly. If you answer his questions, he takes control. It's instantaneous. Izuku swallowed the last bite of fish. I noticed. He relies on verbal triggers to bypass physical resistance. So you'll stay silent? Momo asked, her protective mode engaging again. Silence is efficient, Izuku agreed. He stood up, grabbing his scabbard. But sometimes, people need to be told when they're out of their depth. And now, the first match of the finals. Present Mike roared. The unstoppable Sunblade, Izuku Midoriya, vs. the mysterious general studies student, Hitoshi Shinso. Izuku walked into the arena. The crowd cheered, but he tuned them out. He focused on the boy across from him, purple hair, tired eyes, and a posture that screamed resentment. You're the favorite, aren't you? Shinso called out immediately. Born with a flashy quirk. Blessed with strength. You probably think you can just walk all over us, regular people? Izuku didn't answer. He just started walking. One heavy step after another. Shinso's eye twitched. Oh, the silent treatment? Too cool to talk to a general studies scrub? Must be nice, sitting on your high horse. You think you're a hero, but you're just a brute with a lucky genetic roll. Izuku kept walking. 30 meters. 20 meters. Shinso backed up slightly, clearly unnerved by the silent, approaching juggernaut. He needed a reaction. He needed a crack in the armor. And that girl, Shinso sneered, grasping at straws. Yayorozu? She's just a tool to you, isn't she? A convenient shield so you didn't have to get your precious uniform dirty. Does she know you're just using her? Izuku stopped. The silence in the arena was absolute. Izuku looked at Shinso, his expression darkening. She's not a tool, Izuku said, his voice low and dangerous. She's a partner. Snap. The world turned gray. Izuku's body locked up. The connection snapped into place like a steel collar around his mind. Shinso grinned, letting out a breath he'd been holding. Finally. I win. Turn around and walk out of bounds. Izuku's body twitched. He turned around stiffly. He began to walk toward the boundary line. Midoriya has been caught. Present Mike yelled. He spoke. It's over. In the stands, Momo gasped, clutching the railing. No, he defended me and... Izuku walked. 1 step. 2 steps. Inside his mind, it was a fog. A thick, gray mist of lethargy. The mist whispered. Just walk away. It's easier. But deep in the center of that fog, there was something else. A heavy, dense tungsten brick. And wrapped around that brick was a star. Walk out of bounds? Shinso's command echoed. But Izuku's inner voice countered. That is inefficient. In the physical world, Izuku stopped inches from the line. Shinso frowned. I said walk. Izuku trembled. The gray fog in his mind began to burn away. Not from an external force, but from the sheer, crushing weight of his own diaspone. His mind wasn't a playground Shinso could just walk into. It was a fusion reactor. Shinso suddenly grabbed his head, screaming. Arg! Shinso fell to his knees, clawing at his temples. Through the quirk connection, he didn't just feel resistance, he felt heat. It was like he had tried to put a leash on a solar flare. The mental feedback was searing, a psychic sunburn that overwhelmed his senses. Izuku's fingers dug into the concrete wall of the arena. He turned around. The blank look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a terrifying, lucid green glare. Get out of my head, Izuku said. He lifted his hand. A shockwave of wind pressure blasted across the arena, not hitting Shinso, but shattering the ground in front of him. Shinso stared up, terrified, sweat pouring down his face. What are you? Izuku walked back to him. He grabbed Shinso by the collar of his gym uniform. You have a powerful quirk, Izuku said, lifting him effortlessly with one hand. But your mind is weak. You tried to hold a star with bare hands. He tossed Shinso out of bounds. Winner. Izuku Midoriya. The crowd was still buzzing as Izuku walked into the tunnel leading to the waiting rooms. He rubbed his temples. Breaking the brainwashing by sheer force of will had given him a headache. You broke it. Izuku paused. Shoto Todoroki was leaning against the wall, half his face obscured by shadow. It was a mental lock, Izuku replied, continuing to walk. I just picked it. Todoroki stepped into his path. The way you fight. The way you overwhelmed him. And that heat you release. It's not just a quirk. It feels like him. Izuku sighed. Here we go. Are you All Might's secret love child? Todoroki asked, his voice dead serious. Izuku stared at him for a solid 5 seconds. Then he let out a short, dry laugh. That's your theory? Izuku shook his head. No. All Might is a symbol. I'm just a guy with a sword. My power is my own, Todoroki. He took a step closer, looking at the ice covering Todoroki's left side. But let's talk about you. You're trying to win this entire tournament using only half your quirk. You're rejecting your fire. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. I don't need that power to beat you. You have no right to lecture me, Todoroki shot back, his voice losing its cool for a fraction of a second. You entered this tournament declaring you wouldn't use your weapon. You're holding back your full strength, just like me. Isn't that also arrogance? Izuku paused, looking back at him with a gaze that felt heavier than the concrete walls around them. There is a distinction, Izuku replied calmly. I restrain my power because it is inherently lethal. If I unsheathe the sun against a student, they don't just lose, they burn. My handicap is a safety mechanism for your survival. He took a step closer. Your fire isn't a death sentence. It's just a tool you're ignoring. I hold back to save lives. You hold back to make a point. That's arrogant, Izuku continued coldly. Everyone here, Uraraka, Ida, even Shinso, they're giving 100% of whatever they have just to survive. And you're standing there, blessed with the power of a prodigy, refusing to use it because you think you're too good for it. Izuku walked past him, his shoulder checking Todoroki's slightly. You're not just insulting me by holding back, Izuku said without looking back. You're insulting everyone who worked hard to get here. If you don't use your fire, Todoroki, I'm going to crush you. And it won't even be close. He walked away into the darkness of the tunnel, leaving Todoroki staring at the ground, the ice on his arm crackling in the silence. Hope y'all like this chapter. The length is to make up for chapter 10 being less than 1,000 words. Merry Christmas. The roar of the crowd was a physical weight, but up in the student stands, the big three were focused on a single spectator. He's analyzing everything, Nijire Hato whispered, leaning over the railing to stare at Izuku Midoriya, who sat alone in the front row of the 1A section. Look at his eyes, Mirio. He's not cheering. He's dissecting them. Mirio Togata crossed his arms, his cape fluttering. He's a warrior, Hato-san. He knows he might have to fight the winner. He's looking for weaknesses. Down in the arena, Ochako Uraraka was fighting for her life. Explosions rocked the stadium as Katsuki Bakugo ruthlessly detonated every attempt she made to get close. She's planning something, Izuku muttered to himself, ignoring Ida's flinching at every explosion. She's keeping her center of gravity low. She's taking damage to set up the debris. When Uraraka finally released her meteor shower, the crowd gasped. But Izuku didn't. He watched Bakugo raise a single hand. A massive explosion vaporized the falling rocks. Uraraka collapsed, exhausted. Bakugo's reflexes are superior, Izuku noted, his voice devoid of pity but full of professional respect. She had a solid strategy, but she lacked the raw firepower to overwhelm his defense. A good attempt. The matches continued. The most heartbreaking defeat came swiftly. Momo Yaoyorozu versus Fumikage Tokoyami. It was over in seconds. Dark Shadow rushed her before she could create a shield. She was pushed out of bounds while still trying to formulate a plan. 10 minutes later, inside the waiting room, Momo sat on a bench with her head in her hands. I froze, she whispered to the empty room. I have the highest grades. I have a strong quirk. But when it matters, I can't. The door opened. Heavy boots stepped onto the concrete. Momo wiped her eyes quickly, looking up to see Izuku standing there. He was fully geared up, his heavy tungsten scabbard at his hip. Midoriya-san, she choked out. I lost. I couldn't even. You overthought it, Izuku interrupted. He walked over and sat next to her. He didn't offer a handkerchief or empty words about doing her best. You have an arsenal in your body, Yorozu, Izuku said, his voice calm and grounding. But you treat every fight like a math problem. You try to solve 4x, the perfect item, while the enemy is punching you in the face. He looked at her. You don't need the perfect answer. You just need an answer. A cannon is a cannon, whether it's pretty or not. In our next training session, we're going to stop focusing on creation speed and start focusing on trigger DSPN. Momo stared at him. He wasn't pitying her. He was already planning how to make her stronger. Next session, she asked, hope blooming in her chest. Obviously, Izuku stood up, adjusting his gloves. I need a partner who can keep up. Don't let one loss break your foundation. He walked to the door. Watch my match. I'll show you what it looks like when you stop thinking and start acting. Momo clutched her knees, her face flushing. Yes. The tunnel to the arena was dark and cool. Izuku walked with his usual heavy rhythm. A wall of flame appeared in his path. Enji Todoroki Endeavor stood there, his arms crossed, his beard burning with intensity. You are the boy with the heat quirk, Endeavor rumbled, staring down at Izuku. I watched your fight against the Nomo. Your output rivals my own. Izuku stopped. He looked up at the number 2 hero. Can I help you? I have a match. My Shoto, Endeavor continued, ignoring the dismissal. He is refusing to use his left side. It is a childish rebellion. But if you push him with your fire, you can force him to use his. Make him realize that ice is insufficient. Izuku stared at him. The silence stretched for a long, uncomfortable moment. So, Izuku said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You want me to babysit your son because you broke him? Endeavor's flames flared hotter. Watch your tone, boy. I don't perform tricks for bad fathers, Izuku said coldly, stepping around the massive hero. Your parenting is inefficient. If Shoto uses his fire today, it won't be for you. It'll be because he realizes he can't beat me without it. He walked away, leaving the number 2 hero fuming in the shadows. And now, the match we've all been waiting for. Present Mike screamed, the speakers vibrating. The son of Endeavor versus the slayer of monsters. Shoto Todoroki versus Izuku Midoriya. The two students stood across from each other in the center of the ring. The air was already shivering cold radiating from Todoroki, a subtle heat haze rising from Izuku. Todoroki looked furious. I told you, Midoriya. I will reject his power. And I will defeat you. Izuku sighed. He reached down to his belt. He unclasped the heavy tungsten scabbard. Thud. He dropped it. The scabbard hit the concrete with such force that it cracked the floor, sinking an inch into the ground. The crowd gasped. He dropped his weapon. Nijire gasped in the stands. He's going barehanded? No, Mirio grinned. He's dropping the training weights. Izuku rolled his shoulders, feeling light as a feather. I don't need the counterweight for you, Todoroki. You're fighting with half a quirk. I'll fight with empty hands. Start. Todoroki didn't hesitate. He stomped his right foot. It was the move that had ended his previous matches instantly. A massive, towering glacier of ice erupted from the ground, a tidal wave of frozen spikes rushing toward Izuku faster than a blink. It was enough ice to fill the entire stadium. It's the giant ice wall. Present Mike yelled. Midoriya is buried. The ice loomed over Izuku, threatening to crush him. Izuku didn't dodge. He planted his feet. He pulled his right fist back. He didn't use fire. He didn't use a technique. He just used the raw, unadulterated power of his solid, superhuman body. Stop playing with ice. He punched the air. It wasn't a punch, it was a cannon blast of air pressure. The shockwave hit the glacier head-on. Shatter. The millions of tons of ice didn't just break, they evaporated. The sheer force of the wind pressure turned the glacier into a blizzard of harmless snow. The blast continued, tearing through the arena, hitting the back wall, and nearly blowing the spectators out of their seats. When the snow cleared, Todoroki was standing there, shivering, his ice wall completely gone. And Izuku was walking toward him, not a scratch on his uniform, dusting snowflakes off his shoulder. Is that it? Izuku asked, his voice echoing in the silent stadium. Because if that's your best, you're going to need a heater. Brothers Aura farming FRFR. The stadium was freezing. Mist curled off the shattered remains of the ice wall, but in the center of the ring, Izuku Midoriya stood with his hands in his pockets. Again, Izuku said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Shoto Todoroki gritted his teeth. He stomped his foot again, sending jagged spikes of ice racing across the concrete. They were faster this time, sharper, aiming to impale rather than crush. Izuku didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. He simply pivoted his hips, weaving through the spikes with minimal movement. When a particularly large pillar threatened to enclose him, He raised his knee and stomped downward. Crunch. The vibration traveled through the ice, shattering the structure into harmless shards before it could reach him. Boring, Izuku yawned. He actually yawned. I dropped my sword for a fair fight, Todoroki. But this is just sad. You're disrespecting me. Todoroki flinched as if slapped. I am giving everything I have to reject him. No, Izuku countered, stepping over a piece of broken ice. You're fighting with one arm tied behind your back and expecting me to applaud you for it. I'm not Endeavor. I'm not your father. I'm your opponent, and frankly, you're wasting my time. He stopped walking and looked Todoroki dead in the eyes. Are you going to keep throwing snowballs? Or are you going to actually fight? Something inside Todoroki snapped. The frustration of being looked down upon, the memory of his mother, the pressure of his father, it all boiled over. But for the first time, the heat wasn't directed at his father. It was directed at the arrogant boy standing in front of him who refused to be impressed. You want to fight? Todoroki whispered, smoke beginning to curl from his left shoulder. You want me to burn you? Izuku stopped yawning. A feral, terrifying grin spread across his face. There it is. Whoosh. A pillar of crimson fire erupted from Todoroki's left side. The ice in the stadium melted instantly. The temperature skyrocketed from freezing to sweltering in a heartbeat. Endeavor, up in the stands, stood up and shouted, Shoto, have you finally accepted your purpose? Todoroki ignored him. He screamed, not in despair, but in pure competitive fury. I'm going to win. He raised his left hand. The superheated air from the fire mixed with the supercooled air from the pressure changed instantly. Flash freeze. Todoroki roared. Izuku didn't move. He watched the massive explosion building up. He didn't look worried. He looked excited. That heat wave. Todoroki unleashed a blast of expanding, superheated air that threatened to engulf the entire arena. It was a move that could level a city block. Cementos stood up to intervene. Midnight. That's too dangerous. Don't bother, Izuku said softly. He pulled his hands out of his pockets. He spread his arms wide, as if embracing the inferno rushing toward him. Then he brought his palms together. Sun mastery, solar eclipse. Clap. It wasn't a normal clap. Izuku brought his palms together with such incredible speed and force that he created a vacuum. The air pressure dropped to zero in the space between his hands, creating a localized singularity of wind. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap that silenced the crowd. The shockwave from the clap didn't push outward, it pulled inward. It sucked the oxygen right out of the air in front of him. Without oxygen, fire cannot exist. The massive, terrifying heat wave simply vanished, snuffed out like a candle in a hurricane. The explosion died before it could even touch Izuku, dissipating into harmless gray smoke. Todoroki stood there, his arms still outstretched, staring at the empty air where his ultimate move used to be. How? Todoroki stammered. The smoke cleared. Izuku was standing right in front of him. He hadn't moved a muscle since the clap. You can't burn the sun, Todoroki, Izuku whispered. He reached out and flicked Todoroki on the forehead. It was a light tap compared to his punches, but the wind pressure launched Todoroki off his feet. The dual quirk user flew backward, tumbling out of the ring and landing on the grass with a thud. Shoto Todoroki is out of bounds. Midnight announced, her voice trembling slightly. Izuku Midoriya wins. The stadium was silent for a solid 3 seconds. Then it erupted. Izuku let out a breath, the feral grin fading back into his usual bored expression. He walked over to the edge of the ring where Todoroki was sitting up, looking dazed. Izuku extended a hand. Todoroki looked at the hand, then up at Izuku's face. Why? Because that, Izuku said, was finally a real fight. Todoroki hesitated, then took the hand. Izuku pulled him up effortlessly. Next time, Izuku said, dusting off his shoulder, lead with the fire. It saves everyone a lot of time. As he walked back to the tunnel, Izuku glanced up at the hero section. Endeavor was staring at him, his face a mix of fury and begrudging awe. Izuku didn't acknowledge him. He just kept walking, the unstoppable object moving on to the finals. The atmosphere in the pro-hero section of the stands had shifted from casual observation to a frenzy of recruitment. "I'm drafting him," Mirko announced, kicking her feet up on the railing. "The Sunblade Kid. He fights like a brawler. I like that." No, Best Jeanist interjected, adjusting his collar. "He is too rough. He needs refinement. He needs to learn that true strength comes from style, not just overpowering physics with a tungsten bat." "He didn't even use the bat," MT Lady argued. "He used a clap. A literal clap. Do you know how much lung capacity you need to vacuum seal a firestorm?" In the center of the chaos sat Endeavor. The flame hero was ignoring his colleagues, his eyes glued to the replay of Izuku snuffing out Shoto's flames. He wasn't angry anymore. He was calculating. He forced Shoto to use his left side, Endeavor mused. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He simply created a situation where ice was useless. He is the catalyst. Endeavor pulled out his phone. "Agency. Prepare a draft offer. Priority Alpha. Semifinals. Match 1. Present Mike screamed. The engine of excellence, Tenya Ida. Verse. The unstoppable Sunblade, Izuku Midoriya. Ida stood at the starting line, his engines revving loudly. Smoke poured from his calves. He knew he couldn't win a contest of strength. He had seen Izuku shatter glaciers and catch explosions. "I have one chance," Ida thought, his glasses glinting. "I must ring him out before he can react. Maximum output. Start." Recipro burst. Ida vanished. The sound barrier cracked as Ida accelerated to supersonic speeds in a fraction of a second. He was a blur of blue and silver, instantly closing the distance. He swung his leg, aiming a massive, torque-enhanced kick directly at Izuku's side to knock him out of bounds. Clang. The sound wasn't flesh hitting flesh. It sounded like a car crash hitting a bank vault. The crowd gasped. Ida had materialized right next to Izuku, his leg fully extended, his kick connecting solidly with Izuku's ribs. But Izuku hadn't moved. He hadn't slid back an inch. Ida's face twisted in agony. "Gah!" Izuku looked down at the leg pressed against his side. He patted his ribcage, which felt as solid as a tank hull. "Fast," Izuku complimented flatly. "But speed is just mass times acceleration. And you don't have enough mass to move this obstacle." Ida tried to retract his leg, but his engine stalled. The impact against Izuku's super-dense body had jammed his exhaust pipes. Izuku reached out and grabbed Ida's muffler. "A for effort," Izuku said. He lifted the class rep effortlessly with one hand and tossed him. Ida flew in a gentle arc, landing softly out of bounds. Tenya Ida is out. Izuku Midoriya advances to the finals. Up in the stands, Nijire Hato was practically vibrating. "Did you see that, Yayarozu-chan?" Nijire grabbed Momo's shoulders, shaking her. The glasses boy kicked him full force, and he didn't even jiggle. "Is he really that hard everywhere?" Momo turned a shade of crimson that rivaled a tomato. "Hato-senpai. Please phrase that differently. It is a matter of molecular density. His quirk compresses his cellular structure to contain the thermal energy. So, he's super solid," Nijire mused, tapping her chin with a grin. "Like a rock. No, harder. Like a diamond. But imagine hugging him. It would be like hugging a warm statue." Hey, have you hugged him? Is he cuddly?" I have not hugged him." Momo stammered, frantically waving her hands. "We are training partners. Our contact is strictly combative." "Combative hugging," Nijire nodded sagely. "Got it?" Momo buried her face in her hands. "That is not what I said." While the girls debated physics and phrasing, the arena floor was being cleared for the second semifinal. Match 2. The Explosive Killer King, Katsuki Bakugo, vs. The Shadow Warrior, Fumikage Tokoyami. Bakugo stormed onto the field. He was seething. He had watched Izuku flick Todoroki. He had watched Izuku tank Ida's kick without blinking. He's bored, Bakugo thought, sparks flying from his palms. He's bored with all of them. Start. Dark Shadow lunged. We have the range advantage. Die. Bakugo didn't dodge. He blasted himself forward, right into the Shadow's claws. He unleashed a blinding explosion point blank. Screech. Dark Shadow recoiled from the light. Bakugo didn't let up. He grabbed Tokoyami's head, slammed him into the concrete, and unleashed a chain of explosions that shook the camera feeds. He wasn't fighting Tokoyami. He was fighting the image of a bored green-haired boy. I'm not done. Bakugo roared, blasting Tokoyami out of bounds with excessive force. I'm going to the finals. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows in the stadium hallway. Izuku walked toward the entrance tunnel for the final match. He adjusted his tungsten scabbard, ensuring the clasp was secure. Deku. Izuku stopped. Leaning against the wall, eyes shadowed by his unruly blonde hair, was Katsuki Bakugo. For once, Bakugo wasn't screaming. He wasn't popping explosions. He was eerily quiet. You dropped your sword for icy hot, Bakugo said, his voice low and gravelly. You fought Four Eyes with your hands in your pockets. Bakugo stepped off the wall, walking into the middle of the hallway to block Izuku's path. He looked up, his red eyes burning with a terrifying, focused intensity. Don't you dare drop that sword for me. Izuku looked at him. He saw the pride, the anger, and the desperation to prove that he wasn't just another extra to be brushed aside. You want me to use the weapon? Izuku asked. It's heavy, Bakugo. And hot. I don't care, Bakugo snarled. I want to beat you at your best. I want to beat the monster that killed the Nomo. If you look bored for even 1 second, I'll kill you. Izuku stared at him for a moment. Then, his hand drifted to the hilt of the tungsten blade. He thumbed the guard. Fine, Izuku said, a dangerous glint entering his eyes. If you want the monster, Bakugo, try not to get eaten. Bakugo grinned. It was a savage, feral expression. Finally, he turned and marched toward the arena entrance. The finals were about to begin. The finals were moments away, but the weight of the coming battle had started long before the sports festival began. Flashback. 2 days after the USJ incident. The halls of UA were empty, classes dismissed for the day. Katsuki Bakugo stood outside the faculty office, his hand hovering over the door handle. He was vibrating with a mixture of rage and inferiority that threatened to choke him. He had watched Izuku Midoriya kill the Nomo. He had watched the nerd the pebble on the side of the road casually dismantle a creature that terrified pro-heroes. And what had Bakugo done? Nothing. He had been a spectator in his own origin story. Come in, young Bakugo. All Might's voice came through the door. Bakugo gritted his teeth and shoved it open. Inside, All Might sat at a desk. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't doing a pose. He looked strangely human. Sit, All Might said, gesturing to the chair. Bakugo remained standing, clenching his fists. Why did you call me here? If you're going to lecture me about being reckless, save it. I called you here because I saw your face at the EA, All Might said softly. You looked like a man who had lost his path. I haven't lost anything. Bakugo roared, slamming his hands on the desk. I just need to get stronger. That nerd. He looked down on me. He held back his power because he thought I was weak. I need to crush him. I need to show him that I'm the one on top. Why? All Might asked. The question was simple, sharp. Why do you need to be on top? Because that's what a hero does. Bakugo shouted, but his voice cracked. A hero wins. A hero never loses. If I lose to him, if I lose to a guy who treats villains like trash, then what am I? Is winning everything? All Might pressed, leaning forward. Midoriya won against the Nomo. But do you want to be like him? Do you want to be a sword that only destroys? Bakugo froze. He thought about the heat. The terrifying, cold efficiency of Izuku's eyes as he severed the Noma's limbs. No, Bakugo whispered. He looked down at his hands. I don't want to be a monster. I want to be the undisputed champion. I want to win, but I want to win like you. With a smile. With power that saves people by blowing the bad guys away. He looked up, tears of frustration pricking his eyes. But I can't beat him. Not like this. He's a freak of nature. He's got the sun in his pocket and I'm just a kid with sweaty palms. The room was silent. All Might looked at the trembling boy. He saw the pride, yes, but beneath it he saw a drive that burned brighter than any star. He saw a boy who refused to accept his limits, who wanted to be the symbol of victory. You want the power to defeat young Midoriya? All Might asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You want to stand equal to the sun? Bakugo wiped his eyes aggressively. Obviously. All Might stood up. Steam began to rise from his body. Then let me tell you the truth behind my quirk. The steam cleared. Bakugo's eyes widened in horror and confusion as the skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi was revealed. My power is not natural, Bakugo. It is a torch, passed down from generation to generation. And I have been looking for a successor. All Might extended a skeletal hand. If you have the resolve to win, then inherit my power. Inherit one for all. Flashback. 1 week before the sports festival. The countryside was quiet. The only sounds were the chirping of cicadas and the gentle rustle of wind through the tall grass. Izuku sat on the wooden porch of the old dojo, his legs folded underneath him in a perfect seiza. A pot of tea steamed on a small tray between him and the open yard. He poured 2 cups. One for himself. One he placed on the floor opposite him. I used the blade, Grandpa, Izuku said softly, looking out at the sun setting over the mountains. At the Yushe, there was a creature. A bioweapon. The wind chimed through the wooden eaves. Took you long enough, brat. I thought you'd gone soft in the city. Izuku smiled faintly, sipping his tea. I didn't have a choice. It was going to kill Aizawa-sensei. I severed its limbs and cauterized the wounds. It was efficient. Efficient? But a sword isn't a calculator, Izuku. It's an extension of your will. Did you hesitate? No, Izuku replied. I felt nothing. That's what scares them. All Might. The teachers. They looked at me like I was the villain. Let them look. Sheep always fear the wolf until the bear shows up. Then they beg the wolf for help. Izuku traced the rim of his teacup. They want me to be a hero. To save people with a smile. But sun mastery. It's a killing art. You taught me to destroy. Can a destroyer be a hero? A hero is just a man who protects what matters. If you have to burn the world to save your garden, then burn it. Don't let their soft morality dull your edge. You hold the tungsten. You hold the sun. You are the immovable object. Immovable, Izuku repeated, testing the word. I like that. But now stop moping. You have a tournament to win. If you lose to some city slicker with a flashy quirk, don't bother coming back here. I'll haunt you. Izuku chuckled, setting his cup down. I won't lose. I'll show them the difference between a quirk and a DSPN. He bowed low, his forehead touching the wooden floorboards. Thank you for the tea, Grandpa. Get going. And fix your stance. Your left shoulder is drooping. Izuku stood up, grabbing his bag and his scabbard. He turned to leave, walking down the dusty path back toward the train station. Behind him, the wind blew across the porch. It rattled the empty teacups sitting on the floorboards. And it whistled past the cold, gray stones standing in the center of the yard. Here lies Hisashi Midoriya, master of the Sunday 19XX, 20XX. The incense stick burning in front of the grave finally turned to ash, the smoke drifting up into the empty sky where the old man's voice had seemed so clear only moments ago. Hey everyone, bit of a yap sesh here, so feel free to skip. So I read y'all's feedback on Bakugo getting one for all. And I understand why it seems abrupt and undeserved. Because I know why he gets OFA, mainly because I am writing Season 2 RN, which is mainly because it will be an important part of his redemption is season, but you guys did not know that, so I can understand. So, I am planning to eventually rewrite Chapter 15 to make more sense, maybe include more flashbacks for Bakugo to go into why he was chosen, during the break between Season 1 and Season 2. Because remember, Bakugo never physically bullied Izuku here, as he literally cannot, so Bakugo pretty much has an inferiority complex. So, if right now, you simply don't like Bakugo getting OFA just because you hate his character, then genuinely drop this series and unfollow me. Bakugo is in my top 5 machars, so I'ma give him the respect he deserves. Oh. Also thank you for your support and feedback. Especially the actual constructive criticism and not just pointless hate comments. The sun had set and the stadium floodlights were blazing. The concrete ring, repaired by Cementos after the semifinals, looked pristine. It wouldn't stay that way. The final match. Present Mick's voice cracked with intensity. The immovable object versus the unstoppable force. Izuku Midoriya versus Katsuki Bakugo. The two rivals stood 20 meters apart. Izuku stood loosely, his hand resting on the hilt of his tungsten scabbard. He looked relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. Bakugo was vibrating. He was in a low crouch, his gauntlets trembling. But it wasn't fear. It was the hum of an engine redlining before the race even started. Start! Izuku expected the usual. A blast dash. A right hook. He didn't expect the lightning. Crackle. Red arcs of energy flared around Bakugo's legs. The concrete beneath him didn't just crack from an explosion, it shattered from pure torque. Bakugo vanished. Fast, Izuku thought, his eyes widening. Faster than Ida. Izuku raised his scabbard to block a frontal assault, but Bakugo wasn't there. The blonde had used an explosion behind his elbow to alter his mid-air trajectory, combining the raw propulsion of One for All with the directional control of his own quirk. He was a pinball of violence. Behind you! Bakugo appeared in Izuku's blind spot. He didn't use an explosion. He swung a leg wreathed in red sparks. Smash! The kick connected with the side of Izuku's neck. For the first time in the entire tournament, Izuku didn't just stand there. He was launched. Izuku skidded sideways, his boots carving deep trenches into the concrete as he fought to regain his balance. He slid 10 meters before digging his heels in, stopping with a grunt. He reached up and touched his neck. There was a bruise forming. He moved him. Uraraka gasped in the stands. He actually hurt him. Izuku looked at his hand, then at Bakugo. The blonde was panting, his right leg trembling slightly from the recoil, but his grin was savage. I told you, Bakugo hissed, red lightning arcing off his shoulders. I'm not a pebble you can kick down the road. I'm the one who's going to surpass you. Izuku lowered his hand. The bored expression vanished. A genuine, sharp smile replaced it. That wasn't an explosion, Izuku noted, analyzing the energy signature. That was raw power. You got an upgrade, Kaken. Shut up and fight. Bakugo charged again. This time, he was even more creative. He used One for All to jump high into the air, then fired a massive explosion downward to accelerate his fall. He became a living meteor. Izuku looked up. He couldn't just tank this. If he took that hit directly, he might actually break a bone. Fine, Izuku said. You brought a nuke. I'll bring the sun. His thumb hit the guard. Shwang. Izuku drew the blade. The air in the stadium screamed. The tungsten blade emerged, glowing a blinding, furious white. The heat was instantaneous. The concrete around Izuku's feet bubbled into molten slag within a second. Bakugo saw the blade. He saw the heat wave rising to meet him. Most people would flinch. Bakugo smiled. Too slow. Bakugo twisted his body in midair. He fired an explosion from his left hand, not to attack, but to spin himself like a top. The centrifugal force, combined with One for All, turned him into a drilling tornado. He aimed for the flat of the blade, not the edge. Clang. The impact was deafening. Bakugo's gauntlet struck the side of the superheated sword. The heat instantly began to melt the metal of his grenadier bracer, but the force of his blow knocked Izuku's aim wide. Izuku stumbled. The sheer weight of Bakugo's attack had destabilized his stance. He's heavy, Izuku realized, struggling to keep his footing as the ground melted beneath him. He's hitting with the weight of a freight train. Bakugo landed and immediately pivoted, ignoring the searing heat radiating from Izuku. I can take the heat. My sweat is nitro. The hotter you get, the harder I hit. He unleashed a barrage. Explosion. Izuku was forced on the defensive. He parried with the glowing blade, turning explosions into hissing steam, but Bakugo was relentless. Every time Izuku tried to swing, Bakugo used a micro-explosion to dodge by a millimeter, dancing right on the edge of being incinerated. "Is that all you got, monster?" Bakugo roared, landing a punch on Izuku's shoulder that sent him reeling back. "I thought you were unstoppable." Izuku skidded back, panting. His uniform was singed. His shoulder throbbed. "Okay," Izuku whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You want the monster? You got it." Izuku stopped moving. He planted his feet in the molten pool he had created. He held the sword with both hands, raising it high above his head. He poured everything into the blade. The white glow turned blue. The heat became so intense that the cameras in the stadium started to glitch. Sun mastery, solar prominence, maximum output. Bakugo saw the stance. He knew this was it. "Howitzer!" Bakugo screamed, crouching low. He ignited one for all in his legs and explosions in his palms. He started to spin, creating a vortex of oxygen and fire. Impact. Bakugo launched himself. A tornado of fire and lightning. Izuku swung down. A vertical pillar of concentrated sun. They met in the center. Boom. The world went white. The sound was gone, replaced by a pure, ringing silence. A mushroom cloud of steam and fire erupted from the stadium, reaching higher than the stands. Cementos built 5 walls to protect the crowd. They all crumbled instantly. Mist filled the arena. The crowd was silent, terrified. Slowly, the wind cleared the smoke. The center of the ring was gone. It was just a crater of glass and lava. In the center of the crater, 2 figures stood. Izuku was panting heavily, his uniform burned away at the sleeves, sweat pouring down his face. He held the sword out, the blade now a dull, cooling red. The tip of the blade was resting 1 inch from Bakugo's throat. Bakugo stood frozen. His gauntlets were gone, shattered and melted. His gym uniform was in tatters. His right arm was purple, broken from the recoil of One for All. He stared at the blade. He stared at Izuku. "You." Bakugo rasped, his voice trembling. "You cut the explosion." "You made me work for it," Izuku admitted, his voice hoarse. He lowered the sword, his hand shaking slightly from exhaustion. "That was heavy." Bakugo's eyes rolled back. The exhaustion of using One for All at 100%, combined with the heatstroke, finally took him. He collapsed forward. Izuku caught him before he hit the molten ground. He hauled his rival up, slinging Bakugo's unconscious arm over his shoulder to keep him upright. "Winner," Midnight announced, coughing through the smoke. "Izuku Midoriya." The crowd erupted, but it was a different kind of cheer. It wasn't just hype. It was awe. They had witnessed a battle of gods. Izuku stood in the wreckage, holding up his unconscious friend. He looked up at the private box where All Might was standing. Izuku gave a small, tired nod. He's strong, Izuku thought, feeling the weight of Bakugo on his shoulder. He's finally catching up. But I hope the fight lived up to the hype I was giving it. The confetti cannon fired, showering the podium in gold glitter. But the atmosphere on the steps was anything but celebratory. On the highest step stood Katsuki Bakugo. He was restrained, literally chained to a concrete pillar, his mouth covered by a muzzle, thrashing against the metal bonds with the fury of a rabid animal. On the second step stood Izuku Midoriya. He looked bored, picking a piece of confetti off his shoulder. "And now, the awards," Midnight announced, though her smile was strained. A quick clarification on the results. While Midoriya-kun physically dominated the final engagement, the school board has ruled that the unsheathing of a Class A lethal weapon against a student is a violation of the sports festival safety accord. Therefore, Midoriya is disqualified from the final match, and Bakugo is the winner. The crowd murmured. They had seen the fight. They knew who was standing at the end. But rules were rules. All Might approached the podium. He handed the silver medal to Izuku. "Young Midoriya," All Might whispered, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple. "You really pushed the envelope there." The board was terrified. It was the only logical way to stop the explosion without killing us both, Izuku replied calmly, taking the medal. I accept the ruling. The victory condition was survival, not a gold medal. I achieved my objective. All Might sighed, moving to Bakugo. He removed the muzzle. I don't want it. Bakugo screamed instantly. He had a sword to my throat. He beat me. Don't give me this charity garbage. Take the medal, young Bakugo. All Might said, forcefully shoving the gold medal into Bakugo's mouth to silence him. Heroism is also about accepting the results of the law. 2 days later, the rain was falling over UA High, but inside Class 1A, the air was buzzing. Shota Aizawa walked in, his bandages finally removed, revealing a scar under his eye. He dropped a stack of papers on the podium. The draft nominations are in, Aizawa announced. Usually, the spread is somewhat even. However, despite the disqualification, the pros aren't blind. He pressed a button. The graph appeared on the board. Todoroki, 4,123 Bakugo, 3,556 Midoriya, 6,789. The class gasped. Nearly 7,000? Kaminari shrieked. But he got disqualified. Doesn't that go on his permanent record? Pros want results, Aizawa said dryly. And Midoriya showed he can neutralize a nuclear threat. That's worth more than a rulebook to most agencies. He glared at the class. But before you pick, you need names. Codenames. Midnight will preside. Midnight sashayed into the room, handing out white bards. Show me your souls. The class went through the motions. Pinky. Cellophane. Shoto. Great explosion murder god dynamite. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He walked to the front, flipping his board around with a heavy clack. The solar hero, Eclipse. Eclipse. Midnight tapped her chin. Dark. Mysterious. But why eclipse when your power is the sun? An eclipse blocks out the light, Izuku explained, his voice echoing slightly in the silent room. My power is overwhelming. I spend every day holding it back, casting a shadow over my own strength to protect the people around me. I am the shadow that contains the sun. But when the shadow moves... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I love it. Midnight cheered. Approved. Now came the internship drafts. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at a mountain of offers. The top one was a thick, burning red envelope that smelled faintly of smoke. Endeavor Agency. Attached was a handwritten note, the pen strokes so heavy they had torn the paper. Come. Prove your fire is superior. Stop wasting time with amateurs. Izuku picked up the paper, reading it with a critical, unimpressed eye. He's aggressive, Izuku muttered. He tapped the paper, turning to Todoroki. Your father sent me an offer. Todoroki flinched. He did. I'm rejecting it, Izuku said, tossing the offer into the no pile. Why? Todoroki asked, surprised. He's the number 2 hero. He shouts too much, Izuku critiqued, pulling out a red marker to circle another name. I watched his recent footage. He vents excess thermal energy into the atmosphere instead of recycling it. His heat regulation is sloppy. If I go there, I'll just end up consulting him on basic thermodynamics. I want to fight villains, not fix his bad habits. Todoroki stared at him. Izuku had just dismissed the second strongest man in Japan as sloppy. Right? Todoroki managed. Makes sense. Izuku went back to the list. He scanned past Best Jeanist, too flashy, past Hawks, too fast, I'd get bored, until he stopped at the number 9 hero. Ryukyu Agency. Midoriya-san, the letter read. My sidekick, Nijire Hato, has not stopped talking about your density for 3 days. She insists that your defensive capabilities would be a perfect match for our team dynamic. Also, she wants to know if you are ticklish. Please accept so I can get some work done. Izuku sighed, but a small smirk tugged at his lips. The Dragoon Hero, Izuku mused. Ancient mythical zoology. High durability. And... He glanced at Momo, who was watching him from across the room. Nijire Heido. He circled the name. The Ryukyu agency was located in a sleek high-rise in the city center. Izuku stood in the lobby, wearing his hero costume, the black Ronin gear with the tungsten scabbard. He looked intimidating, like a statue of war. "Welcome." A blur of periwinkle and white crashed into him from the ceiling. Unlike Ida or Bakugo, Izuku didn't toss her. He simply braced his legs, his boots gripping the tile. Nijire Heido slammed into his chest, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that would have crushed a normal person's ribs. "You came. You actually came." Nijire squealed, looking up at him, her chin resting on his chest. "I told Ryukyu you'd come. I told her the sun boy was curious." Izuku looked down at her. She was very close. "Personal space, Heido-senpai," Izuku said, though he didn't push her away immediately. Nijire. Ryukyu, the dragoon hero, walked out of her office. She looked exhausted but professional. "Please stop assaulting the intern. He hasn't even clocked in yet." Nijire let go, floating backward but still hovering in his orbit. "But look at him. He's so solid. It's like hugging a warm anvil." Hey, can I try to lift your sword? Is it really tungsten?" Ryukyu sighed, extending a hand to Izuku. "Welcome to the agency, Eclipse. I'm Ryukyu. Thank you for choosing us. Though I suspect you had a specific reason? Most boys your age aim for the top 3. Efficiency," Izuku lied smoothly. "Your agency specializes in containment and suppression of large threats. My skill set is designed for exactly that." "And?" Ryukyu raised an eyebrow, glancing at Nijire, who was currently poking Izuku's shoulder to test its hardness. "And," Izuku admitted, "Endeavor has volume control issues." Ryukyu laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "Fair enough. Well, get ready. We're not doing patrol today. We've been requested for a joint operation in Hosu City. Apparently, the hero killer rumors are causing unrest, and the local agencies need backup." Izuku's eyes narrowed. "The hero killer." "Understood," Izuku said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "I'm ready." Nijire cheered, spiraling into the air. "Field trip with Sunboy. This is gonna be great." As they walked out, Izuku didn't know that in Hosu, a man named Stain was sharpening his blades, unaware that a sword far heavier and far hotter than his own was coming to meet him. "You? How'd you like that? I think Bakugo getting first here makes sense considering rules are rules, right? Also, here is the original ending to Chapter 16 that I made. I thought the new one fit better as it was supposed to be a more serious fight. This is funnier though." "You?" Bakugo rasped, his voice trembling. "You cut the explosion." "Checkmate," Izuku whispered. "Stop." Midnight's voice cracked through the speakers like a whip. "Match terminated." Izuku blinked, slowly lowering the sword. He looked up at the referee stand. "He is neutralized. I win." "No." Midnight pointed her crop aggressively at Izuku. "Midoriya Izuku is disqualified." The crowd gasped. Even Bakugo looked confused. "Disqualified?" Izuku frowned. "Why?" "Violation of the equipment agreement." Midnight announced, her face stern. The support item dispensation explicitly stated that under no circumstances were you to unsheath that blade against a student. It is classified as a lethal weapon. By drawing it, you have broken the rules of the sports festival. Izuku looked at his sword. He looked at the melted crater around them. He looked at Bakugo, who was alive only because Izuku had perfect control. It was the only way to stop him safely, Izuku argued calmly. "If I hadn't cut the explosion, the impact would have killed us both." "Rules are rules," Midnight declared. "For violating safety protocols. The winner is Katsuki Bakugo." The stadium was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into confused murmurs. Bakugo stood there, trembling. He looked at the winner on the screen. He looked at Izuku, who was sheathing his sword with a resigned shrug. Bakugo didn't cheer. He didn't smile. "Don't." Bakugo whispered, his voice shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. "Don't you dare." Izuku patted Bakugo's uninjured shoulder. You won, Kaken. Congratulations. I didn't win. Bakugo screamed, tears of frustration pricking his eyes as he shoved Izuku's hand away. You had a sword to my throat. You beat me. Don't you dare give me this pity win. Take the medal, Izuku said, turning to walk away. Survived the sun. That counts for something. As medical bots rushed in to carry the thrashing, screaming winner away, the crowd watched the loser walk out of the arena with his head held high, the true victor in everything but name. The address All Might had given him led to a decrepit, two-story building in Kofu that looked like it hadn't seen a coat of paint since the pre-Quirk era. Katsuki Bakugo stood in front of the rotting door, his bag slung over his shoulder, his brow twitching. That thing All Might, Bakugo muttered, sparks popping from his palm. He sent me to a nursing home. He kicked the door open. Is anyone alive in here? Inside, the room was a mess. Lying face down in a pool of ketchup was a small, elderly man in a yellow cape. Bakugo froze. For a split second, he thought the old man was dead. Then he saw the empty sausage wrapper. Get up, old man, Bakugo snarled, slamming the door shut. I know you're not dead. All Might sent me to learn how to use his power, not to clean up your lunch. The old man Gran Torino stopped snoring. He lifted his head, wiping the ketchup from his mustache. Who are you? Gran Torino asked, squinting. Are you the pizza DLVY? I'm the guy who's gonna be number one. Bakugo roared. Stop playing dumb. Teach me how to stop breaking my bones every time I punch someone. Gran Torino's eyes sharpened instantly. The senile act vanished. You're loud, Gran Torino said. And stiff. Zoom. Bakugo blinked. The old man was gone. A sharp pain exploded in the back of Bakugo's head. He stumbled forward, spinning around to see Gran Torino standing on top of the microwave, holding a cane. You have the reaction time of a sloth, Gran Torino criticized. All Might said you were a prodigy. He didn't mention you were blind. Bakugo's vision went red. You want to go, Gramps? Come get me, Gran Torino taunted, hopping off the microwave. Try to hit me with that fancy power of yours. If you can touch me once, I'll teach you. Bakugo didn't hesitate. He ignited the red lightning of One for All in his legs. I just need speed, Bakugo thought. Maximum output. He launched himself. The floorboards cracked. He crossed the room in a blur. But Gran Torino was faster. The old man used his jet quirk to bounce off the walls, ceiling and floor in a chaotic, unpredictable zigzag. Bakugo swung at empty air, smashing a table. He fired an explosion to redirect himself, but Gran Torino was already behind him again. The cane hit Bakugo's knees. Bakugo buckled. The cane hit his ribs. Too slow. Gran Torino yelled, bouncing off the ceiling. You're treating the power like a gun. You load it, aim it, and fire it. That takes time. In a real fight, you're dead before you pull the trigger. Bakugo growled, firing a massive explosion to fill the room with smoke. Shut up. He swung blindly through the smoke. Nothing. You're used to your explosion quirk, Gran Torino's voice echoed from everywhere. Explosions are bursts. Instant release. But One for All isn't an explosion. It's an engine. Bakugo paused. An engine? Don't flick the switch on and off, Gran Torino instructed, landing on the doorframe. Keep the engine idling. Spread the power through your whole body, not just the part you're using. Maintain the hum. Bakugo stood in the center of the wrecked living room. He closed his eyes. He thought about his sweat. He ignited it instantly. That was his instinct. But this power, this red lightning, it was different. It was a heavy, thrumming energy. Don't ignite it, Bakugo told himself. Fuel it. He breathed in. He imagined the power flowing like gasoline through a fuel line. Not a spark, but a steady stream. Red lightning began to flicker around his body. Not in jagged bursts, but in a constant, low-level hum. His hair spiked up slightly. The veins in his arms glowed faintly. Oh! Gran Torino raised an eyebrow. He figured it out already? Tashinori took 3 days to get that far. Bakugo opened his eyes. They were focused. The feels. Buzzing, Bakugo muttered. He took a step. He didn't shatter the floor, but he moved with terrifying speed. He grinned, the red lightning stabilizing around him. This is Turbo Mode. Gran Torino smirked. All right, Turbo. Let's see if you can catch a jet. Sometime later, in Hosu City. The sun was setting over the skyline of Hosu. The streets were busy, but there was an underlying tension in the air. Izuku Midoriya walked down the sidewalk, flanking the dragoon hero Ryukyu. To his right, Nijire Hato was floating, humming a tune while inspecting a street vendor's cart. The reports say the hero killer attacks in alleyways with low visibility. Ryukyu briefed them. Eclipse, you take the rear. Your sensory skills are our best bet for early detection. Nijire, stay high. Roger. Nijire chirped. She floated down to Izuku. Hey, if we find him, are you gonna use the sword? Or are you gonna do the clap thing again? Depends on his resistance, Izuku replied, scanning the rooftops. If he's fast, the clap won't work. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the ground a few blocks away. A plume of smoke rose into the air. A villain attack? Ryukyu frowned. That doesn't fit Stain's MO. No, Izuku said, his eyes narrowing as he saw a winged creature Anomo flying above the buildings. That's not Stain. He gripped his tungsten hilt. That's the League. Izuku turned to Ryukyu. I'm going to secure the alleyways. If the League is causing chaos, Stain will use it as cover to hunt. Go! Ryukyu ordered, transforming into her massive dragon form to engage the Nomo. Nijire, back him up. I'm coming with you, son boy. Nijire shouted, blasting off after Izuku. Izuku sprinted into the labyrinth of alleys. He didn't know that a few streets away, Tenya Ida was standing over a paralyzed pro-hero, staring into the blood-red eyes of the hero killer, holding a blade that was about to meet its match. Nothing to say really. Hope y'all enjoyed. The alleyway smelled of rust and stagnant water. Tenya Ida lay on the wet pavement, his body paralyzed, his eyes wide with terror and helpless rage. Standing over him was the hero killer, Stain. The vigilante's jagged blade dripped with blood. You are weak, Stain rasped, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. You sought me out for revenge, not to save anyone. You are a fake. And fakes must be called. He raised the sword to end the Ingenium legacy. A shockwave of air pressure slammed into the alleyway from above. Stain leaped back instinctively, his blade slicing empty air. A figure landed between the killer and the victim. He didn't land in a crouch, he landed on his feet, creating a spiderweb of cracks in the concrete simply from his weight. Izuku Midoriya stood up, dusting off his shoulders. Above him, Nijire Hato floated, glowing with golden energy. Found him. Nijire chirped, though her eyes were serious. He's fast, son boy. Be careful. Stain narrowed his eyes. He analyzed the newcomer. The heavy armor. The dark metal scabbard. The aura of absolute, terrifying stillness. The solar hero, Stain murmured, a twisted smile spreading across his face. I saw the festival. You possess the conviction of a true warrior. You carry a blade to purge the wicked. Draw it. Stain pointed his jagged katana at Izuku. Show me your truth. If you are worthy, I will let you live. Izuku looked at the killer. Then he looked at Ida. Finally, he looked back at Stain with a gaze so bored it bordered on insulting. No, Izuku said. Stain blinked. What? I don't draw my blade for serial killers with a manifesto, Izuku stated flatly. You aren't a monster. You're just a man with a knife and a bad philosophy. You aren't worth the edge. The insult hit Stain harder than a punch. You think I am beneath you? I think your logic is inefficient, Izuku critiqued, crossing his arms. You kill heroes to create better heroes? You're just reducing the workforce and increasing the crime rate. You're not a revolutionary, Stain. You're a pest. False. Stain moved. He was faster than Ida. Faster than Bakugo. He was a blur of killing intent. Clang. Stain's sword struck Izuku's left shoulder. But it didn't cut. It hit the tungsten scabbard that Izuku had raised with casual speed. Draw it! Stain screamed, striking again and again. Fight me with your full power. Clang, clang, clang. Izuku blocked every strike with the sheathed weapon. He didn't give an inch. He didn't even unclasp the lock. Your steel is weak, Izuku noted. Stain roared, putting his entire body weight into a move aimed at Izuku's heart. Izuku didn't dodge. He swung the heavy scabbard like a baseball bat, meeting the move head-on. Snap! The sound of shattering metal echoed through the alley. Stain's jagged katana, worn down by countless battles, exploded into shards against the military-grade tungsten. Stain stared at his broken hilt. Conviction. Your conviction is brittle, Izuku said, taking a step forward. Just like your sword. Nijire wave. From above, Nijire unleashed a spiral of golden energy. Stain dodged, rolling across the pavement. He looked up, realizing he couldn't cut the boy. The boy was an immovable wall. But the girl was flying. She was soft. A wall cannot protect everything. Stain hissed. He pulled a throwing knife from his vest. He didn't aim at Izuku. He whipped his arm up, throwing the blade directly at Nijire's exposed leg. Senpai! Izuku shouted. But the knife was too fast for Nijire to dodge midair. What? Izuku's hand snatched the knife out of the air inches before it hit Nijire. The blade sliced into his palm, drawing a thin line of blood, but he didn't drop it. He crushed the knife in his grip, bending the metal into a useless lump. The air in the alleyway changed. The boredom vanished from Izuku's face. The analytical cool was gone. In its place was a heat so intense that the puddles around his feet began to steam. You targeted my partner, Izuku whispered. The sound was low, feral. Stain froze. For the first time, the hero killer felt fear. He wasn't looking at a hero. He was looking at a predator. You wanted the sun? Izuku asked, dropping the crumpled knife. Fine. He spread his arms wide. Sun mastery, solar eclipse. Clap. Izuku slammed his palms together. The vacuum shockwave exploded outward in the confined space. It stripped the oxygen from the alley in a split second, creating a pressurized void that slammed into Stain like a hammer. Stain gasped, his lungs collapsing as the air was stolen from him. His eardrums popped. He stumbled, disoriented and deafened. Izuku was already there. He didn't use a sword. He didn't use a technique. He drove a fist into Stain's stomach with enough force to dent a tank. Wham! Stain's eyes bulged. He was lifted off his feet, folding around Izuku's fist. He didn't even have the breath to scream. Izuku let him drop. Stain hit the wet pavement, unconscious before he touched the ground. Silence returned to the alley. Izuku stood over the fallen killer, his hands still smoking slightly from the friction of the punch. He looked up at Nijire, checking for injuries, then walked over to Ida. Midoriya-kun. Ida sobbed, tears mixing with the rain on his face. I tried to. You tried to kill him out of hate, Izuku said sternly, looking down at his friend. I stopped him to protect my team. That is the difference between a killer and a hero. He reached down, grabbing the broken remains of Stain's sword and tossing them into a dumpster. Now get up, Ida. We have paperwork to do. The rain in the alleyway had stopped, replaced by the distant sirens of the Hosu City Police. Izuku looked down at the unconscious hero killer. He needed to secure the package. He looked around, grabbed a steel street lamp, and bent it around Stain's torso like a twist tie. Ida, Izuku said, hoisting the villain over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Can you move? My legs. Ida winced, trying to stand. I can manage. But Midoriya-kun, the other Nomus. Ryukyu-san is alone. We're going, Izuku said. He looked up at Nijire. Senpai, clear the path. I'll handle the cargo. On the main boulevard, the dragoon hero Ryukyu was having a bad night. She was in her full dragon form, grappling with a massive, four-armed Nomu, while two winged Nomus swooped down, trying to gouge her eyes out. They just keep coming. Ryukyu roared, swiping a winged beast into a storefront. Where is backup? Above the chaos, The spotlights of a news helicopter cut through the darkness. The reporter leaned out, camera zooming in. This is live from Hosu. Ryukyu is pinned down, but wait. Look at the sky. It's the big three's Nijire-chan and is that the Sunblade student? Backup has arrived. A spiral of golden energy blasted down from the sky. Nijire Hato floated above the intersection, her hair glowing with immense output. Ryukyu, I'll group them up. Nijire shouted. Nijire wave, double vortex. She unleashed two corkscrewing beams of energy. Instead of hitting the Nomus directly, the waves wrapped around the two flying beasts, forcing them to crash violently into each other in midair, tangling their limbs. Batter up, a calm voice noted. Izuku Midoriya sprinted into the fray. He wasn't running normally, he was carrying the unconscious Stain over one shoulder, yet he moved with the momentum of a freight train. He leaped into the air toward the tangled Nomus. He didn't drop Stain. He simply pivoted his hips, using the tungsten scabbard in his free hand. He swung the scabbard like he was hitting a home run. The sheer weight of the metal, combined with the target being immobilized by Nijire, shattered the creature's bones. Both Nomus were launched horizontally, crashing through a brick wall 50 feet away. Perfect combo, senpai. Izuku called out, landing heavily on the asphalt. Eclipse. Ryukyu sighed in relief, shrinking back to human form as the pressure eased. You made it. Is that the hero killer? He was inefficient, Izuku said, adjusting Stain's limp body on his shoulder. The news helicopters circled overhead. Did you see that? They're working in perfect sync. The raw power of the Eclipse and the control of Nijire-chan. It's a flawless duo. Suddenly, a screech tore through the air. A fourth Nomu, a stealth type with camouflage skin, had looped around the building. It dove silently toward Nijire's exposed back while she was waving at the helicopter. Senpai! Behind you! Nijire turned, but it was too late to dodge. The monster's claws were inches from her face. She flinched, squeezing her eyes shut. It never came. Thud. Izuku had stepped between them. He had dropped Stain for a split second to catch the Nomu's claws with his bare forearm. The claws tore his sleeve but didn't even scratch his skin. His density was simply too high. The monster might as well have been clawing at a diamond wall. Focus, senpai, Izuku said, looking back at her over his shoulder, his face inches from hers. Don't get distracted. Nijire opened her eyes. She stared at his broad back, at the way he stood like an immovable fortress between her and the monster. She looked up at his face, seeing the intense, protective glint in his eyes. Her heart did a violent flip that had nothing to do with flight. Her face turned bright red. He saved me. Nijire squeaked, completely flustered. So cool. The Noma hissed, trying to pull its claws free. Get away from him. Nijire screamed, panic and embarrassment mixing into a volatile cocktail. She didn't measure her output. She just shoved her hands forward and unleashed everything she had. A massive pillar of golden energy erupted point-blank. It didn't just knock the Noma back, it launched the creature vertically. The Nomu spiraled upward, breaking the sound barrier, higher and higher until it was just a twinkle in the night sky. She blasted it into orbit, Ryukyu muttered, staring up. Izuku picked Stain back up, dusting off his uniform. Good reaction time. A bit excessive on the output, though. Nijire covered her face with her hands, steaming. Don't look at me. I panicked. Before they could celebrate further, the temperature in the street skyrocketed. Flash fire fist. A streak of blue and orange fire tore through the intersection. Endeavor landed in the center of the road, incinerating the last standing winged Nomu, the one Izuku had batted away earlier, with a blast so powerful it melted the asphalt and scorched the facade of the nearest office building. Oomph! Endeavor grunted, his beard flaring. Trash. He turned, expecting to see awestruck civilians. Instead, he saw a student dragging a bound prisoner. You, Endeavor scowled, recognizing the green hair. The boy who refused my offer. Izuku walked past him, dragging Stain's boots across the melted road. He stopped next to the number 2 hero and looked at the scorched building. "You're venting too much heat," Izuku critiqued casually. Endeavor blinked. "Excuse me?" "That flash fire move," Izuku pointed to the blackened wall. "You wasted approximately 30% of your thermal output on the surrounding environment. That's inefficient. You damaged a civilian structure because you have poor regulation control." Endeavor's eye twitched. "I just saved the city, you arrogant brat. I incinerated the threat." "You incinerated a billboard," Izuku corrected, looking bored. "And you're overheating. I can see the steam coming off your shoulders. If you recycled that heat into your core instead of broadcasting it, you wouldn't need to vent so often." "Sloppy." Endeavor looked ready to explode. "Sloppy? I am the number 2 hero." "And I," Izuku said, hoisting the unconscious Stain up so Endeavor could see his face, "am the intern who just captured the hero killer while you were busy fighting minions." Endeavor froze. He looked at the man in Izuku's grasp. The noseless face. The blades. Stain. Endeavor whispered. "You defeated him?" "He had a knife," Izuku shrugged. "I have a tungsten bar. It wasn't a fair fight." Just then, footsteps pounded onto the scene. Shoto Todoroki arrived, ice sliding under his feet. "Midoriya!" Shoto called out. Ida sent a location ping. "Are you—" He stopped. He saw his father, red-faced and steaming. He saw Izuku, holding the most wanted villain in Japan like a piece of luggage. "You told him, didn't you?" Shoto asked, a rare smile touching his lips. "I told him his heat regulation was amateur," Izuku confirmed. He didn't take the criticism well. "You." Endeavor sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Izuku. "You have the audacity." "Hey, Turbo!" A new voice shouted. Katsuki Bakugo burst onto the scene, followed by a bouncing Gran Torino. Bakugo was sweating, his costume dusty, but his eyes were sharp. "I heard the explosions." Bakugo yelled. "Where are the villains? I need to test my engine." He looked around. He saw the piles of defeated Nomu. He saw Ryukyu catching her breath. He saw Nijire still fanning her red face. And finally he saw Izuku holding Stain. Bakugo stopped. His shoulders slumped. "Of course," Bakugo spat, sparks popping in his hands. "I learn how to run and you go and bag the final boss. You really piss me off, Deku." "You're late, Kaken," Izuku said, tossing Stain toward the approaching police officers. "We're already done here." Gran Torino hopped next to All Might's successor, eyeing Izuku warily. "That kid. He's got a presence." He cleared the board before the cavalry even arrived. As the police swarmed to arrest Stain and the paramedics tended to the heroes, Nijire floated down next to Izuku, linking her arm through his. "Uninjured one. That was amazing," she cheered, forcing herself to recover from the embarrassment. "We were a perfect team. You blocked, I blasted. And then you told the fire guy he was sloppy. You're the coolest, Eclipse." Izuku looked at the number 2 hero, who was currently being restrained by his own sidekicks from yelling further, and then at the girl clinging to his arm. "It was just efficient," Izuku said. But as he walked away, leaving the chaos behind him, even he had to admit, it felt pretty good to be right. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the Ryukyu agency, but the peace was shattered by the sound of Nijire Hato shrieking with laughter. "Oh my gosh! Eclipse! You have to see this!" Nijire was floating upside down above the office sofa, clutching her smartphone. Izuku, who was methodically cleaning his tungsten scabbard with a polishing cloth, didn't look up. "Is it the news report about the Nomu?" Izuku asked. "No. It's better." Nijire flipped right side up and shoved the phone into his face. "You're trending number 1 on HeroTube. Look at the title." Izuku squinted at the screen. The video had 10 million views in 12 hours. Title: UA student calls Endeavor sloppy to his face. Gone wrong? The video was shaky footage taken by a civilian hiding in a shop. It showed the smoking aftermath of the battle. Endeavor was shouting. And there was Izuku, looking bored, pointing at the scorched building. "You wasted approximately 30% of your thermal output. That's inefficient. Sloppy." The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. OMG, the disrespect. Endeavor got lectured by a teenager. Who is this kid? He drags the hero killer and roasts the number 2? Hashtag sloppy Endeavor is trending. Izuku handed the phone back. I was just stating facts. His regulation was poor. Nijire burst out laughing again, wiping a tear from her eye. You're amazing. You didn't even flinch. Most pros are terrified of him, and you treated him like a bad intern. Ryukyu walked in, holding a tablet and looking amused. Eclipse, I just got a call from Endeavor's agency. They want to know if you're available for a joint training session next week. I think he wants a rematch on the debate. Tell him I'm busy, Izuku said, standing up and sheathing his sword. I don't have time to fix his ego. Ryukyu chuckled. I already did. Now, since it's your last day with us, I want to run one final test. We've seen your power against ground targets. But how do you handle superior mobility? She gestured to the window. Roof access. You versus Nijire. No swords. Just capture. The roof of the agency was a wide, flat helipad. The wind whipped at Izuku's hair. Nijire floated 20 feet in the air, her hair glowing with golden energy. She looked like a goddess of the sky. Don't hold back, son boy. Nijire called out, grinning. If you can't fly, you can't catch me. Start. Ryukyu ordered. Nijire wave. She unleashed a barrage of golden spirals. Izuku didn't dodge. He swatted them away with the back of his hand, his dense skin absorbing the impact like it was rain. You're sturdy, Nijire noted, spiraling higher. But can you move? She dove. Instead of attacking, she flew circles around him, creating a vortex of wind to lift him off his feet. Izuku felt the updraft. Most people would be lifted. Izuku simply bent his knees. He grounded himself, imagining his legs were pillars of tungsten driving into the earth. The wind howled, tearing at his uniform, but he didn't budge an inch. Immovable, Izuku whispered. Nijire frowned. Why won't you go up? She swooped in for a direct grab, intending to lift him physically. She hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled with 100% output. Up, she grunted. He was heavy. Impossibly heavy. It was like trying to lift a mountain. Gotcha, Izuku said. Before she could disengage, Izuku's hand clamped gently around her ankle. Eep! Izuku didn't slam her. He just anchored her. With a simple shift of his weight, he pulled her down from the sky. Nijire yelped as gravity suddenly reasserted itself, and she tumbled out of the air. Izuku caught her. He caught her bridal style, absorbing her momentum instantly so she didn't feel a jolt. The wind died down. Nijire blinked, looking up at him. She was breathing hard from the exertion. Izuku wasn't even winded. You really are the only thing I can't move, Nijire whispered, her cheeks flushing pink. It's kind of frustrating. Izuku looked down at her. Stability is key, senpai. Nijire looked at his eyes. They weren't bored right now. They were focused on her. You can call me Nijire, she murmured. Maybe put me down before Ryukyu takes a picture. Izuku set her down gently. Good match, Nijire-senpai. As they walked back inside, Nijire fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a small, golden charm shaped like a spiral. She tied it to the hilt of his tungsten sword. So you don't forget me when you're famous, she grinned. And text me. Or I'll come to you and float outside your window. I'll text, Izuku promised. A rare, genuine smile broke his stoic mask. The return to UA High was predictable. When Izuku walked into Class 1A, silence fell. Then Kaminari and Siro dropped to their knees and bowed. Teach you's master of sass. Kaminari shouted. How do you roast the number 2 hero and live? Did he really cry? Mina asked, leaning over his desk. The comments say he cried. He didn't cry, Izuku sighed, sitting down. He just steamed. Midoriya-kun. The class quieted down as Tenya Ida approached. His arm was bandaged, but he stood tall. I saw the video, Ida said, his voice thick with emotion. And I remember the alley. You saved me from my own foolishness. You were right. I was inefficient. I let emotion cloud my judgment. He bowed deep, a 90-degree angle. Thank you for saving me. And for saving my brother's legacy. Izuku looked at the class representative. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't give a speech. You learned, Izuku said simply, pulling out a textbook. Lesson complete. Now stop crying, it's inefficient. You need to hydrate. Ida sniffled, wiping his eyes, but he smiled. Right? Hydration is key. From the back of the room, Katsuki Bakugo watched them, his feet up on his desk. He scowled, but there was no heat in it. He's getting ahead again, Bakugo thought, clenching his hand where the red lightning hummed beneath his skin. Just wait, The engine is warming up. The Yaoyorozu estate was larger than UA High School. Izuku sat at a mahogany dining table long enough to land a plane. He was studying for the written portion of the final exams, surrounded by Ida, Uraraka, and Todoroki. The quadratic formula is essentially a parabolic trajectory, Izuku muttered, scribbling notes. Simple physics. BZZZT. Izuku's phone vibrated against the polished wood. Momo Yaoyorozu, who was pouring tea from a silver pot, froze. Her ears swiveled like radar. Izuku picked up the phone. From Nijire attachment. Photo of Nijire upside down hanging from a chandelier. Look. I'm a bat. Also, Ryukyu says hi. Miss you, son boy. Izuku stared at the screen. She has impressive core strength. Momo's eye twitched. She recognized the sender immediately. The energetic third year had been texting Izuku non-stop since the internship ended. Is that Hado-senpai? Momo asked, her voice dangerously sweet. Yes, Izuku replied, typing a reply. Please be careful, gravity is constant. I see, Momo said. She snapped her fingers. A butler materialized from the shadows. Sebastian. Bring the reserve blend. The one from the private harvest. The reserve, miss? The butler looked shocked. But that is for the Prime Minister. Bring it, Momo ordered, her eyes burning with a competitive fire that rivaled endeavors. And the macaroons. The gold leaf ones. Ida adjusted his glasses, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple. Yaoyorozu-kun seems highly motivated to provide hospitality today. Though I question if gold leaf aids in study retention. I think she's trying to drown the competition in expensive leaves, Ida-kun, Uraraka whispered, looking terrified of the aura radiating from their hostess. We should just stay quiet and eat the fancy cookies. She turned back to Izuku, placing a cup in front of him with aggressive elegance. Midoriya-san. Please enjoy this tea. It is infinitely superior to whatever vending machine beverages you might find at other agencies. Izuku sipped it. It's efficient. The caffeine content is high. Momo beamed. Victory. BZZZT. From Nijire. You're so serious. Send me a pic of your sword. Or your face. Whichever is harder. Momo gripped the teapot handle so hard it bent. Sebastian. Bring the cake. The entire cake. Todoroki slurped his tea loudly, staring at the bent metal in Momo's hand. She has the same look my old man gets when All Might is on TV. Scary. The written exams passed without incident. Izuku, Momo, and Ida topped the charts. But the real test was the practical exam. Class 1A stood in the monitoring room, facing Aizawa. Usually, Aizawa began, looking more tired than usual. The practical exam involves fighting robots. However, due to the excessive potential of this year's class, we have changed the protocol. The wall behind him opened. 13, Ectoplasm, Midnight, Cementos, and the other teachers walked out. You will be fighting us, Aizawa grinned, a terrifying expression. In pairs. The class erupted in panic. Teachers? That's impossible. Mineta screamed. Relax, Aizawa said. We will be wearing heavy compressed weights to limit our power. It is a handicap match. Your goal is to handcuff us or escape through the gate. He began reading the list. Todoroki and Yaoyorozu versus me. Momo paled. Uraraka and Aoyama versus 13. Kaminari and Ashido versus Principal Nizu. The list went on. Finally, only 2 students remained. Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. You too, Aizawa said, his voice dropping an octave. You are problem children. Your combat capabilities are statistically outliers. Therefore, no normal teacher can check you safely. So who do we get? Bakugo huffed, crossing his arms. Boom. Present Mike. Boom. A heavy footstep shook the room. The door frame cracked as a massive figure ducked to enter. I am here. All Might roared, not smiling. His blue eyes were shadowed, glowing with intensity. To crush you. The class went silent. Midoriya. Bakugo, Aizawa said. You will fight All Might. And, All Might added, flexing a bicep that was thicker than Minetta's entire body, I will not be wearing weights. What? Kirishima yelled. That's murder. They're gonna die. They are the unstoppable force and the immovable object, Aizawa reasoned. Anything less would be insulting. Izuku and Bakugo looked at All Might. They looked at each other. For the first time since they were 4 years old, they shared a look of mutual understanding. We don't have to hold back, Izuku realized, his hand drifting to his tungsten hilt. We can actually hit him, Bakugo grinned, red lightning sparking around his body. Full throttle. Exam ground, City J. The mock city was silent. Izuku and Bakugo stood at the entrance. The objective is to escape or capture, Bakugo recited, stretching his legs. Running is for losers. Agreed, Izuku said, adjusting his gloves. Efficiency dictates we neutralize the threat. We can't outrun him, but we can out-hit him. I'll take the lead, Bakugo commanded, smoke curling from his palms. You take the heavy hits. Don't tell me what to do, Kaken, Izuku replied, though there was no heat in it. Just don't miss. A massive shockwave tore down the main street, shattering windows for 10 blocks. At the far end of the city, All Might stood, wind pressure rolling off him in waves. Come, young heroes. All Might bellowed, his voice echoing like thunder. Show me what the next generation is made of. Izuku drew his sword. The blade glowed white-hot instantly. Bakugo ignited his turbo mode, the red lightning humming like a jet engine. Target acquired, Izuku whispered. Let's kill the boss, Bakugo roared. They charged. The mock city street was silent for exactly 1 second. Then the air pressure dropped. All Might didn't run. He simply vanished, reappearing directly in front of Izuku. He pulled his fist back, the wind screaming around his arm. Texas Smash. It wasn't a test. It was a hurricane condensed into a knuckle sandwich. The punch hit Izuku cross-armed guard with enough force to level a skyscraper. The pavement behind Izuku disintegrated, peeling up like a carpet for 3 city blocks. Dust and debris were blasted backward at supersonic speeds. All Might smiled, expecting to see the boy flying into a building. The dust cleared. Izuku was still there. He had slid back 50 meters, his boots carving deep, molten trenches into the asphalt, but he was standing. His arms were crossed over his chest, the tungsten scabbard smoking from the friction of the air pressure. Izuku lowered his arms, shaking them out. Heavy, Izuku noted, looking All Might in the... But I felt heavier. All Might's smile faltered. He tanked it? Don't ignore me. Crackle. Red lightning tore through the dust cloud. Bakugo, utilizing his turbo mode, was moving faster than sound. He flanked All Might, blasting him in the ribs with a point-blank explosion boosted by 1 for all. All Might flinched, swatting at Bakugo, but the boy used the recoil to bounce off a building and attack from above. You're fast, young Bakugo. All Might laughed, leaping into the air to intercept him. But linear. All Might grabbed Bakugo's face midair, ready to slam him into the ground. Now, Deku! Bakugo screamed, his voice muffled by All Might's hand. Izuku didn't hesitate. He thumbed the guard of his sword. Shwang. He drew the blade. Instantly, the temperature in the narrow street spiked from 25 degrees to the oxygen shivered. The asphalt turned to liquid. Sun mastery, Izuku whispered, slashing the air not to cut All Might, but to superheat the atmosphere around him. Bakugo, still in All Might's grip, ignited every sweat gland in his body. Supernova! The combination of Izuku's solar heat and Bakugo's nitroglycerin created a chain reaction. The air didn't just explode, it ignited into a blinding white sphere of plasma. Kaboom! The blast was blinding. All Might released Bakugo instinctively, shielding his eyes from the searing light. Now! Izuku charged. He didn't use his sword. He sheathed it to free his hands and lunged through the fire. He tackled All Might. It was a clash of titans. Izuku slammed his shoulder into All Might's midsection, driving the number one hero back into a concrete pillar. All Might roared, trying to push him off. You have grown strong, young Midoriya. I'm just stubborn. Izuku grunted. He locked his arms around All Might's waist. He dug his heels into the ground, activating every ounce of his density. He became an anchor. All Might pushed. The ground cracked. The building behind them shook. But Izuku didn't move. He held the symbol of peace in place, his muscles straining, his uniform tearing at the seams. Kaken! Izuku yelled, veins popping in his neck. End it! Above them, the smoke cleared. Katsuki Bakugo was falling from the sky. He had used the supernova explosion to launch himself into the stratosphere, and now he was coming down like a meteor. Red lightning crackled so intensely around him that it looked black. Die! Bakugo spun, adding centrifugal force to gravity and one for all. Turbo! Impact! He slammed his heels directly into All Might's exposed stomach. Crunch! The wind was knocked out of the symbol of peace. The concrete pillar behind All Might disintegrated into dust. The shockwave shattered every window in a 5-mile radius. All Might coughed, his eyes rolling back for a split second as the air left his lungs. In that second of weakness, Izuku moved. The ancient FFS snapped onto All Might's right wrist. The other end snapped onto the exposed rebar of the destroyed pillar. Capture complete, Izuku gasped, letting go and collapsing onto his back, panting heavily. Bakugo landed next to him, clutching his leg, grinning like a maniac. We got him. All Might slumped against the pillar, the HNDCFFS dangling. He looked at the two boys lying in the rubble, one the immovable vessel of the sun, the other the unstoppable engine of his own legacy. A genuine, proud smile stretched across his face. Yes, All Might wheezed, giving them a thumbs up. You certainly did. Team Midoriya and Bakugo. Pass. The summer air was humid, sticking to the skin, but inside the first-class cabin of the private jet, the air was crisp and cool. Izuku Midoriya sat in a plush leather seat, looking out the window at the endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean. He wore a crisp white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal his scarred forearms, and black slacks. On the seat next to him rested a long, black case containing his tungsten scabbard. He never traveled without it. Across the aisle, Momo Yaoyorozu sipped sparkling water, though her fingers drummed nervously on the armrest. In the seat behind her, Katsuki Bakugo was sprawled out, wearing a skull t-shirt and noise-canceling headphones, looking asleep but radiating a low-level irritation. I still cannot believe All Might invited us to Island, Momo said softly, careful not to wake the explosive blonde. The clearance level required for civilians is incredibly high. He said he needed backup, Izuku replied, turning away from the window. He hasn't seen his old friend Dave in years and is nervous. He wanted Bakugo there because, well, I don't know. And he wanted me there to keep Bakugo from blowing up the island. Why did you invite me? Momo asked, her voice dropping slightly, a hopeful glint in her eyes. Izuku blinked. Because the invitation specified a +1 for the gala. You understand high society protocols, formal dining etiquette, and how to navigate political conversations. It was the most efficient choice to ensure we don't accidentally insult a foreign dignitary. Momo's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before recovering. Efficiency. Of course. He picked me for my manners, Momo thought, stabbing a slice of fruit from her complimentary platter. At least it's not because I'm a warm anvil like Hato-senpai. As if summoned by the thought, Izuku's phone buzzed on the table between them. From Nijire, are you at the moving island yet? Bring me a souvenir. Something shiny. Or a robot. Wait, bring me a robot that shines. Izuku typed a quick reply, I will look for a reflective automaton. Hato-senpai again? Momo asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. She wants a robot, Izuku noted. I can create a robot, Momo muttered under her breath, taking a sip of water. I can create a shiny robot right now. Shut up, Bakugo grumbled from the back seat, pulling one headphone cup away from his ear. If you two keep whispering, I'm going to detonate the drink cart. I didn't agree to this trip to listen to a rom-com. We are discussing logistics, Kaken, Izuku said calmly. Logistics my butt, Bakugo scoffed, sliding his headphones back on. Just wake me up when we land at the nerd convention. Island was a marvel of engineering. A man-made floating city that roamed the ocean, acting as a sanctuary for the world's greatest scientists and support gear developers. As they disembarked, the security checkpoints were rigorous. However, the moment the guards scanned Izuku's biometrics, their eyes widened. Subject, Eclipse. Weapon authorization. Granted by All Might. Waiting for them at the arrival gate was All Might in his deflated, skeletal form wearing an oversized suit. Beside him stood a blonde girl with blue eyes and glasses, bouncing on the ball of her feet. Uncle Might, the girl cheered, hugging the skeleton man carefully. Melissa. All Might laughed. You've grown. He turned to the students. Young Midoriya, young Bakugo, and young Yairose. Welcome. I am glad you could all make it. Melissa stepped forward, her eyes scanning the group. So these are the UA students. Uncle Might told me so much about you. She grabbed Izuku's hand first, shaking it enthusiastically. You're the Sunblade. My dad showed me the data. I have so many questions about your thermal regulation. Then she turned to Bakugo, who was dragging his suitcase with a scowl. And you must be Katsuki Bakugo, the winner of the sports festival. Though. She adjusted her glasses, squinting at his right arm. You're favoring your shoulder. Is your rotator cuff inflamed? Bakugo stiffened. Ah, who are you calling inflamed, Four Eyes? Melissa Shield. She introduced herself, undeterred by his aggression. And I can see the micro-tremors in your bicep from here. You have terrible posture for a champion. Bakugo stared at her, caught off guard. I don't have tremors. I'm just buzzing. Sure, Melissa smiled, a hint of challenge in her eyes. We'll see about that in the lab. Melissa looked at Bakugo. Most people flinched. She just adjusted her glasses. You have terrible posture for a champion. Bakugo stiffened. Ha! Later that afternoon, the group moved to the iExpo. Melissa dragged them into a private testing bay. Okay, Izuku first, Melissa said. Squeeze this bar. Izuku grabbed the titanium bar. He squeezed. It liquefied. The machine errored out. Incredible, Melissa breathed, looking at the data. Your density creates a localized gravity well of pressure. I can modify your scabbard to vent heat as propulsion. Like a rocket. That sounds efficient, Izuku nodded. My turn. Bakugo shoved Izuku aside. Move that. I'll show you real power. Bakugo grabbed a new bar. He didn't just squeeze, he ignited his turbo mode. Red lightning crackled. The machine didn't just break, it exploded. Smoke filled the room. Beat that. Bakugo roared, grinning wildly. You idiot. Bakugo froze. Melissa Shield was standing in front of him, hands on her hips, looking furious. She wasn't scared of his explosion. She was mad about her machine. That sensor cost $5,000. Melissa yelled. And look at your arm. She grabbed Bakugo's right arm. He tried to pull away, don't touch me, but she held firm, rolling up his sleeve. His arm was trembling. There were microscopic bruises forming along the tricep. Your power output is too high for your skeletal structure, Melissa diagnosed, her voice shifting from angry to clinical. You're creating microfractures every time you use that lightning. If you keep fighting like a brute, you'll lose function in this arm by the time you're 20. Bakugo stared at her. No one usually talked to him like this. They either feared him or praised him. She was analyzing him. I can take it, Bakugo growled, but he didn't pull his arm away. You don't have to, Melissa said, looking him in the eye. I can fix it. I have a prototype. A compression gauntlet that absorbs the recoil. It lets you fire at 100% without shattering your bones. Bakugo looked at the blonde girl. She was a nerd. A scientist. But she looked at his dangerous quirk and didn't see a threat. She saw a puzzle she could solve. Build it then, Bakugo grunted, looking away. But it better not be trash, Four Eyes. Melissa smirked. It'll be perfect, Sparky. Evening fell, bringing with it the main event, the Eye Island Gala. The central ballroom was a cathedral of glass and light, located at the very pinnacle of the central tower. Chandeliers, suspended by anti-gravity fields, floated like constellations above the heads of the world's elite. Heroes from America, Europe, and Asia mingled with politicians and tech moguls, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive ambition. Izuku stood near a massive marble pillar, feeling distinctly like a heavily armored weapon in a room full of crystal glasses. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that Momo had insisted upon, tailored to fit his broader-than-average shoulders without restricting movement. Under the jacket, invisible to the casual observer but comforting to him, was the shoulder harness for his tungsten scabbard. You look stiff, a voice teased. Izuku turned to find Katsuki Bakugo wrestling with a silk tie. The blonde was in a sharp black suit, but he looked like he was being strangled by it. This thing is a noose, Bakugo snarled, ripping the knot loose for the third time. Who invented formal wear? I bet it was a villain. Here, let me, Melissa's shield appeared, laughing softly. She reached up, her deft fingers working the fabric before Bakugo could bat her away. You have to be gentle with it. It's silk, not a villain's neck. Bakugo grumbled, looking away, but he stood still while she fixed his tie. Whatever. It's still stupid. Across the room, Momo Yaoyorozu approached Izuku, holding 2 glasses of non-alcoholic sparkling cider. She wore a deep crimson evening gown that cascaded to the floor, the fabric shimmering like liquid rubies. Her hair was down, framing her face in soft waves, a stark contrast to her usual rigid ponytail. Midoriya-san, she said softly, offering him a glass. You seem alert. Too many entry points, Izuku muttered, taking the glass but keeping his eyes on the balcony levels. Security is automated. Efficient, but prone to hacking. If I were attacking this place, I wouldn't come through the front door. Momo sighed, a small smile playing on her lips. You never turn it off, do you? Even at a party. Relaxation is inefficient when protecting a high-value target, Izuku replied, glancing toward the backstage area where All Might was preparing for his speech. Well, Momo stepped closer, her arm brushing against his. Perhaps you can protect me then? Since I am unarmed in a room full of strangers. Izuku looked down at her. He saw the way the light caught her eyes, the faint flush on her cheeks. For a moment, the tactical overlay in his mind quieted. You're not unarmed, Yaoyorozu, Izuku said, his voice dropping slightly. You're the smartest person in the room. But I'll stay close. Momo beamed, her heart fluttering. That is acceptable. Suddenly, the music cut out. It wasn't a fade-out. It was a hard stop. The gentle hum of conversation died instantly as the overhead lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely. Red emergency lights strobed into life, casting long, bloody shadows across the terrified crowd. The sound of heavy blast doors slamming shut echoed through the tower. Steel shutters descended over the panoramic windows, sealing the ballroom off from the outside world. What's happening? Is this part of the show? My phone. No signal. A high-pitched feedback whine tore through the speakers, forcing everyone to cover their ears. Then a calm, chilling voice echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. On the balcony level, previously empty, a squad of armed men materialized from the shadows. They wore tactical gear and full-face masks, their rifles trained on the crowd below. In the center stood a man with pale hair and a metal mask covering the lower half of his face. "I am Wolfram," the man announced, leaning over the railing. "And as of this moment, the I-Island security system is under my control. This tower is now my fortress." A hero in the crowd, an American powerhouse with a strength Quirk, stepped forward. "You think you can take us hostage? There are 50 pro heroes in this room." He tensed his muscles to charge. Nothing happened. The hero blinked, staring at his arms. "But my strength, it's gone." Panic rippled through the room like a wave. Other heroes tried to activate their powers: fire, ice, lasers, but nothing sparked. It was as if a dampener had been thrown over their very souls. "Melissa," Izuku whispered, his hand instantly going to his chest where his heat usually simmered. It was cold. The internal furnace that he spent every waking moment suppressing was gone. "What is this?" "The Quirk suppression system," Melissa gasped, her face pale with horror. "It's a prototype defense grid built into the tower's infrastructure. It radiates a frequency that disrupts the Quirk factor in the human brain. It's supposed to be for containing S-class villain prisoners. They must have hacked it and turned it on everyone." Wolfram chuckled darkly from above. "Correct. You are all currently Quirkless. And my men are not." The mercenaries leveled their rifles. "We have hostages," Wolfram continued. "If anyone tries to be a hero, we start executing the scientists. I suggest you all sit down and stay quiet." The room froze. The most powerful people on the planet were suddenly reduced to frightened civilians. All Might, trapped backstage in his weak form, would be helpless. Izuku put down his cider glass on a nearby table. The clink was loud in the silence. "Midoriya?" Momo whispered, clutching his arm. "We're defenseless. We can't fight them like this." Izuku looked at the mercenaries. He calculated the angles. He looked at the heavy steel doors blocking the exit. They suppressed the Quirk factors, Izuku analyzed quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Which means I can't generate heat. I can't actively compress my cells to increase density." He reached under his tuxedo jacket. His fingers found the clasp of his Hros. He pulled out the tungsten scabbard. The black metal seemed to absorb the red emergency light. "But my resting state," Izuku said, gripping the 60-pound metal bar as if it were a twig, "is biologically altered. My muscle fibers are naturally 3 times denser than a human average. That is not an active Quirk factor. That is just biology." He looked at Momo, his green eyes burning with a cold, terrifying resolve. "I don't need a Quirk to swing a club." "Wait," Melissa hissed, looking at the guards on the balcony. "There are too many of them. And they have automatic weapons." "Guns are inefficient against tungsten," Izuku stated flatly. He stepped out from behind the pillar. "Hey!" A mercenary on the lower level shouted, aiming his rifle at the student. "Get back, kid, or I'll put a hole in you." Izuku didn't stop. He walked toward the service exit, his gait heavy and rhythmic. "I said freeze." The mercenary panicked and pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot echoed like a cannon in the enclosed space. The bullet hit Izuku squarely in the chest. It didn't penetrate. It hit the dense pectorals beneath his tuxedo shirt and flattened instantly, falling to the floor with a tiny, mocking clink. The mercenary stared, his eyes bulging behind his mask. "What the?" "I told you," Izuku said, raising the heavy scabbard. "Inefficient." He threw it. The scabbard spun through the air like a black blur. It smashed the mercenary's rifle into shrapnel and continued its arc to slam into the man's chest. The guard was launched backward into the wall, knocked unconscious instantly by the sheer kinetic impact. Izuku caught the rebounding scabbard with one hand. "Move," Izuku ordered his team, not looking back. "We're taking the stairs." Bakugo, who had been forced into a tuxedo by Melissa, "You are not wearing a skull shirt to a gala," ripped his tie off. Finally, Bakugo grinned, grabbing a heavy metal stanchion from the velvet rope line. "I was getting bored." "Bakugo, wait," Melissa whispered, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small, metallic device. "It's not finished, but wear this. It'll stabilize your wrist if you have to punch something hard." She slapped a brace onto his wrist. Bakugo looked at it. It fit perfectly. "Let's go," Bakugo said, actually waiting for her to move behind him before charging the stairs. The climb up the tower was brutal. Without quirks, they fought with improvised weapons. Izuku was the shield, tanking bullets with his dense body. But Bakugo was the berserker. On the 150th floor, a massive security bot blocked the path. "Get out of my way!" Bakugo roared. He swung a steel pipe, but the bot caught it. The bot raised a fist to crush him. "Bakugo!" Melissa screamed. Bakugo didn't retreat. He dropped the pipe and punched the robot's metal face with his bare fist, protected only by Melissa's brace. Clang! The brace absorbed the shock. Bakugo felt the impact, but his wrist didn't snap. The robot stumbled back. "It works," Bakugo whispered, looking at the device. He looked back at Melissa, a feral grin spreading across his face. "Hey nerd, make me more of these." "Just keep climbing," Melissa yelled back, though she was smiling. They reached the server room. Izuku headbutted the Gatling gun villain. Melissa rebooted the system. System reboot. The green light washed over them. Quirks returned. Bakugo's red lightning flared to life instantly, crackling around him with the sound of a jet engine. Melissa ran to the secure locker. "Bakugo! Catch!" She threw the large, red metal case. He caught it, the case unfolding into the full gauntlet. He slid his arm in. It locked with a hiss. "No recoil?" Bakugo asked, flexing the red metal fingers. "3 shots at 100%, Melissa warned, standing next to him. "Make them count." Bakugo looked at the gauntlet, then at the girl who built it. "Watch me," Bakugo said. Boom. Wolfram crashed through the ceiling. Izuku drew his white-hot blade. Bakugo charged his gauntlet. The unstoppable force and the immovable object were fully armed. And this time, Bakugo had the gear to match his ambition.